I'll jump in first. You know, it sounds very obvious, but it comes up time and time again for a reason. So the small things are really important. The spelling, the grammar, making sure you've addressed your letter to the right person, the right office. These mistakes happen time and time again, and they're small things and they shouldn't mean the world, but you know, like I say, when you're sorting through hundreds of applications, unfortunately sometimes those can be a deciding factor. So it sounds so obvious, but it's super, super important to review your cover letters over and over and over again. And even when you think you're done reviewing it, review it one more time. Another thing though, obviously, is, you know, your cover letter shouldn't be a regurgitation of your resume. It should definitely bring something more to the table. I can go to your resume and see all the, you know, major points. Your cover letter should focus on a few things, and, you know, really should be telling a story. Either it expands on what's already in your resume, or it gives me something completely different that's going to grab my attention and it's going to be interesting. And, you know, to the extent that you can tie it to sort of those core competencies that I mentioned, where, you know, it demonstrates that you're a self-starter, or demonstrates that you're always, you know, looking to learn more, that you're ambitious, or anything like that, that's a good strategy to take, I think.
Piggyback off of that. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, go ahead. You go ahead.
Thank you. I also think talking about the resume being there, your cover letter can differentiate a bit. So, for example, I did all my schooling in Ontario and I wanted to move back home to work. So I mentioned that at the beginning. It was an introduction into who I am. I was born and raised in Halifax, lived in Ottawa, and now wanted to come back. And a Halifax firm is going to think that's attractive. You have a passion for this city. So think about little personal things that you wouldn't put in your resume, but that your cover letter gives you that opportunity to sneak in.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. And what I did was, I always like to tell stories in cover letters. And, you know, if you can have a theme throughout, that's always good as well. But I think you should also, you know, if there's something in your grades or your resume that's, you know, it's going to be a red flag, I think you should be honest about that. And I think you should, you know, address it, and make sure that when you address it, you make sure you tie it into the theme of your cover letter, because that's always going to connect really, really well. And that's going to come off more personal. And if it's very sterile, if your cover letter is very, you know, I did this, and because I did this, now I know how to do this and I want to do this, it's not going to have the same impression on a recruiter as if you are very honest, vulnerable, you tell a story, there's a narrative there. It just makes it more personal, and it makes you more unique and more memorable.
Absolutely. I think two things I'd say is echoing what everyone else said in terms of narrative. Make sure that you understand, first of all, like on an introspective level, what your narrative is in terms of a descriptive level, and also an aspirational level, who you want to be. And then secondly, a theme that I did, if you just want like a starting structure, even though the end goal is, again, just having a good narrative, what I did is I took basically what are the key competencies I wanted to express that I learned from XYZ in my resume, and I said that. So I said I learned attention to detail from working, you know, as a researcher. I learned leadership skills working as a clinic head or whatever. So you could take a key competency and kind of competency and say how you develop that at this, so you add color to your resume, and you're essentially selling yourself. What are the key things that you learned?
So each of you brought in some very important points, whether it was telling a story or showing why you were interested in the firm, making the firm really gravitate to wanting to take you on. So absolutely, those are all great points. So what are the key points and highlights that should appear in the body of a student's resume? Should each resume that you send to a firm, you know, be different? Should there be a variation? Should it be the same? What should your resume be? What message should your resume be sending to firms?
I'll go. It depends on what firms you're applying for. So I don't think there is any harm in sending the same resume. This is very different from the email introduction that I said no to. I think, yes, you can send the same resume because it shows your history. If the firms are very similar in terms of what you'll be doing there, then it makes sense. However, if you're applying for firms and one has a bit of a different focus, and you know that you did something maybe a while back that you wouldn't have bothered to bring up on one resume, but it makes sense for this one, then you can tailor it a bit. But I wouldn't be too concerned about trying to differentiate your resume. I don't think that's a faux pas.
Yeah, I agree completely. You know, most people use the same resume to apply to similar firms, and that's absolutely okay, and I think more than expected. You know, resume really is just an overview of your, you know, your education, your work history, volunteer experience, maybe some of your interests and things like that. So that typically shouldn't change very much. However, if you are, you know, applying to some place that does something completely different, then you might want to, there might be those experiences you want to bring up that you thought about taking out, or there might be some, you know, maybe some of the bullet points are altered just slightly to, you know, emphasize a specific experience that otherwise you would have left out. But I think it's really the norm to have sort of one resume that you use for most places.
Great. Does anyone else want to jump in, or?
I think they covered it.
Great. Awesome. Great minds think alike. Okay. What is the maximum page length or lengths of a resume? What's the
I'm going to listen closely to this answer because I welcome your insight, panel members.
I thought the rule of thumb was 2 pages, but I could be.
I've never seen anything more than 2 pages. I mean, you want to obviously you want to pay attention to the application instructions. You know, a firm's going to tell you what they're looking for, and if you're going through the structured recruitment process, then they're going to spell out for you what you need to apply. But typically 2 pages is the norm. I haven't seen any variation from that.
The one exception I would say to that is for those interested in applying to an American firm. Totally, why not? The common rule of thumb is 1 page, and that can be a bit of a squeeze. It feels like, but it is a useful exercise to learn how concise, and it is a key difference. So if you are going to apply to either an American firm in the U.S. or American firm that has an office in Toronto, which there are quite a few, make sure to keep it to 1 page.
Great. Well, thank you guys for sharing, you know, the importance of, you know, page lengths and resumes. So now we're going to go on to the interview process. How should students go about preparing for an articling interview?
I think your first stop should always be the firm's website. You know, researching their student programs, any recent files that the firm has, you know, done, any interesting cases. If there's an extracurricular group at the firm, whether it's a Black affinity group or a diversity group, just looking at firm initiatives, their community outreach, just really knowing about the firm inside and out. And I think that's the first step you should do, and those are the areas that you should focus on.
And I would say, you know, in terms of how you should prepare, well, we should probably go back to the first thing we talked about, which was networking. The networking process is, in my opinion, the most important part. Because you can do a lot of research, but if you go look at firm websites, and I'm sure you've noticed already, there's not a whole lot to differentiate the different firms. If they're, you know, if you're looking at the websites for a bunch of full service firms, the impression you're going to get is that they all do the same thing. And they just, you know, have different logos and use different colors on their website. But speaking to people who actually work at the firms is where you're going to get the important information that I think helps you understand what is different about those firms and where they actually focus their time and energy. Because, you know, especially with the full service firms, you'll see that when you look at what their practice areas are, you're going to see a shopping list of areas. But what you might not know and what you're not able to tell from the website is, you know, let's say, you know, there's aviation law on there. They probably have one lawyer who does that. So if you're just relying on the website, you might, by accident focus on, oh, this is what I'm really interested in. I see you guys do this. And then all along, they're just like, well, we don't really do a lot of that. So if that's what you're really interested in, we're probably not the firm for you, because there are other firms who do more of that work. So I think it's really important to do your research on the websites, wherever you can get information. But I think people are a big source that you can't overlook in terms of preparation and research.
So echoing what Tristan and Kyle said, the other thing I've found helped me immensely for any interview I've done is also researching if you have the opportunity, I guess there's later questions to address this, if you have the opportunity to know who your interviewers are, researching that person in and out. So step one, when you're creating that cover letter, I'd say is understanding your narrative on a descriptional level and an aspirational. Step two is when you're understanding who you're interviewing with, understanding their narrative, where they went to school. If you can find out their hometown. I comb LinkedIn, there's no such thing as too much research on a person ahead of time. But then, of course, not saying that you did all that research, just coming off subtly, like, I see that you went to school here and there, et cetera, and asking them questions about this and that, and getting a lawyer to talk about their narrative. And there's nothing I've found love more than talking about their own narratives. So that's a big one. I found that a lot of success. And then generally, because there's lots of research questions afterwards, me personally, preparing for any interview, I treated it like a performance, because you are performing to a certain degree, and you're showing the best of your abilities, right? And for that, I had to do, after the research and et cetera, I always had kind of a ritual in terms of how I got myself in the right mindset. I treated it like I was a wrestler coming out, so I'd have like the same theme song I listened to, and I'd wear a suit and tie even if I'm at home, and I'd kind of just get into that mindset where I can perform optimally after doing that research.
That's fantastic. The Rocky theme song is mine, by the way.
Tiger.
I just want to echo what was just said. LinkedIn is a great resource, so don't feel limited to the website, and it doesn't look bad on you if I can see that you looked up my profile. Don't be worried about that. As was said, lawyers tend to have egos, and it never hurts, so don't worry about that. Do your research. Take advantage of what's out there.
And then something just popped into my head, as I was talking about reaching out to people and speaking with people. One thing that's really easy to do is, again, going back to the importance of connecting with students and junior associates, ask them about what the interview process at that firm is like. Ask them what sort of questions you're likely to face. It's not a bad idea to have that information, handy in your head so you can help prepare. And then, Elser's strategy sounds funny, and I had a nice little laugh, but I'm the same way. When it came to interviews, I really like rituals and sort of, just processes to get ready for things. So, for me, it's like going for a short walk before my interview just to calm my nerves, maybe getting a coffee, not interviews, but when I used to write exams, I always had a ritual when I would start my exams. The first 30 seconds, I wouldn't touch paper. I wouldn't look at it. I would always have Starburst candies with me, and I would make sure to have a Starburst before I started my exam, because it just helped me feel comfortable before we got into it. And you can treat interviews the same way.
Okay, so coming out of that question, a lot of different, things, but great things, and an opportunity to, really play the Rocky theme song or some Starburst. Elster's a performer. We love to see it. And Elster, actually, you touched on my next question, which is about knowing your interviewers beforehand. Is there always an opportunity to know your interviewers beforehand? And if so, how do you prepare yourself for that interview? Which I know we already touched on, but I think we can go more in depth.
Yeah, that is the downside. Sometimes they'll throw you a curveball, especially if it's like a time of year where they're just trying to cram all their interviews. So you're going to have a last minute switch of who the interviewer is, or that person just busy on a file. So you'll feel like all that research has gone to naught. But that's at that point relying on what Tristan said earlier, just doing general research on the firm and trying to understand the firm's general narrative. And then I wouldn't be too nervous. Whenever that happened to me, I just treat it as an opportunity to get to know that person all the more, because you don't sound ignorant when you ask very basic questions at that point. It's your practice area, et cetera, et cetera. It's very excusable at that point, and just get an opportunity to get to know a person.
Great.
Yeah, just
sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to follow up. Just I don't think I have too much to add. I think Elsa, more or less covered it. It's typically the norm, but sometimes things come up. Sometimes certain firms may just not have that practice of letting you know ahead of time. And I would think that as long as you've done enough to prepare for the interview and know enough about the firm and you've done your research, you should, in most cases, be okay. I think you should prepare to the extent that whoever's in front of you, you know enough about the firm and you're, ready for the interview. It's nice to have that extra bit of information of who it is ahead of time, even just to calm your nerves. Sometimes it's nice because you can tailor certain questions to those specific individuals. But I think if you've done your research, you've put your work in, you should be in a position where you're comfortable and ready to go regardless. That should be the goal.
Absolutely. Great points, everybody. So we have a couple of questions coming from participants. So the first question is from Alyssa. Given that recruiters are looking at so many applications, should resumes and CVs have a certain aesthetic look when applying?
So one thing that actually Kyle told me when I was in law school is white space is very, very important. Especially if it's a larger recruitment process, there's nothing recruiters hate more than, flipping the page and seeing all this ink on it and it's like a novel. It just gets them in a bad mindset from the jump that they just may not want to read that, the whole thing. So I think keeping it very, keeping white space, don't feel like you have to say absolutely everything on your cover letter or include absolutely everything you've ever done on your resume. Leave some mystery to it. Leave some things that you can mention during the interview that maybe is not on your resume or in your cover letter. That's always a good thing too.
It's already come up, but it should be you proofing and then ask somebody else with fresh eyes to proof, because typos can stand out sometimes, especially when you're getting so many applications. So look, edit, and then have somebody else do it for you as well.
Yeah, I know some people like to get creative with, the format of their resume. And I think, it's great to be able to show off your personality and, creative flair if you have it. A lot of lawyers could stand to be more creative. It's not something that you see a ton of in the legal profession, but it can be a little bit risky sometimes. So, I think most people really emphasize sort of a clean presentation. The white space, as Tristan emphasized, having someone review it for you is a huge help. The career development office at most schools is a huge resource, and they're going to be able to tell you, what you should and shouldn't do when it comes to the basics like formatting a resume or what your resume should look like or what should be on your resume. They've done this, year in, year out. They've seen countless students be successful. Lean on them. Make sure, it's okay if, I think you should feel free to, be yourself. But I think understand that there is typically a standard that people are looking for, and there's a reason for that.
Also a tidbit, I know this isn't exactly the question, but kind of related. For cover letters and resume, one thing that saved my life in terms of how to proof properly, because everyone does say proofread, but you don't really learn how to proof unless maybe have an undergrad in English, is read backwards. The human mind has a tendency to skip words, especially if you've seen those same words like 100 times and you've been proofing this 100 times. What I do when I proof now is I change the whole font so it looks different and looks new to my eyes, and then I read it backwards. So then it overcomes the brain's tendency to skip words, and then you can catch silly typos. That's just a tidbit.
Great answers and great question. So our next question comes from Joshua. What would be the advice to an internationally trained lawyer seeking an articling position, especially as most positions are filled a year in advance?
Yeah, that's a good question, and I think it's a tough position to be in because of the structured recruitment processes that exist. I think at that point, networking becomes even more important. The NCA network is an amazing group that works with internationally trained lawyers and lawyers going through the accreditation process. And they're over 500 members strong right now, and their members have incredible success in going through the process. I do know that there are more and more structured NCA recruitment interviews that are taking place and coming along. Um, it is, I'm not going to lie, it's difficult outside of the structured recruitment processes to find opportunities because they're not as plentiful. But I really do believe that at that point, networking becomes just that much more important.
Also, I'd say publishing never hurts. When you're at that point and you're essentially trying to make a job for yourself, and you have an area of interest, I would say publish. You look at these Lexology, Mondeck articles, they're not very long, they're like a page or two. Just look at what has been coming down lately in the courts of appeal in your area of interest, summarize the case. There you have your face on Lexology, Mondeck. That goes a long way.
Great. And the last student question that we have is, what should you bring to the interview? And that question is from Alicia Ray.
I think you should always bring a copy of your resume with you and your cover letter just to have. They're going to have it with them, but it just looks like you're more prepared for you to have it there to be able to hand out if need be. So that's my first tip.
Yeah, I think that's like the only thing you should absolutely have with you in terms of something that's material and tangible. Otherwise, I think you want to bring obviously high energy, positive attitude, and preparedness. You want to make sure that you're in a position, you put yourself in a position to be successful, and you have to take those steps before you actually get to the interview to make sure you're there. But in terms of just like physical things you need to have with you, I don't think there's anything other than a resume or cover letter.
And your phone on silent. It's probably with you, but put it on silent or off.
One thing that I found was helpful for me, I don't know if this is the case for anyone else, but I always made sure to have a cold glass of water with me as well, if for nothing more than to give me time to think about an answer for the question. Oh, that's a great question. I would repeat the question, take a sip of water, and then that way I had like a full, 15 seconds to think of an answer. It came in handy sometimes.
Right.
Absolutely.
Oh, sorry, Kyle, go ahead.
Oh, I was just echoing what he said. Sorry.
Oh, no worries. But yes, thank you, Jaclyn, great point with having your phone on silent or off. The worst thing that could happen is, your phone's ringing in the middle of you answering a question. And also with the finesse for drinking the water, great strategy for students if you're nervous answering a question, for sure. So when preparing for interviews, how should students go about speaking about their knowledge of the firm while in an interview, but in a way that seems very natural and fluid?
One thing, if you're given an opportunity to ask questions, which you almost always are, is you can preface it with, so-and-so told me, I saw on your website, I saw from LinkedIn this, could you tell me more about that? Or I have an interest in that. Do articling students have an opportunity to be involved in that? So you can kind of take some time ahead of time to think about how you're going to work it in.
Yeah, I think actually what Jaclyn said is the best strategy. That is sort of the most foolproof strategy, because the questions you're going to be asked are sometimes not the questions you expect. And it's nice when you can work something into an answer, but sometimes those questions just don't allow that. And you do want it to be natural, but you always, typically have an opportunity to ask one or two questions at the end. And you should spend some time thinking about what those questions are going to be. And, sometimes it's a little unfortunate. Sometimes students will just have these very generic questions that they found online. They Googled good interview questions, good interview follow-up questions or something like that, and they rely on those. but they should really be tailored to the firm that you're interviewing with. And it's a great opportunity to show that you've done your homework and that you know about this firm and that you're eager and really want to be at that firm. I think those questions are your best opportunity.
Yeah, I would agree with what Kyle said. I think the questions that you can ask really shows the knowledge and the research you've done on with that firm. I think also piggybacking off that, I don't think you should be afraid of asking questions about, you know, diversity initiatives that firms are doing, if that's important to you. If that's something that's particularly important to you, especially in the environment that we're living in today, don't wait until it's too late to find out that the firm is doing nothing in that regard. I think it's always important to, you know, put that on the map up front. And I always say, if the person across the table doesn't know what the firm is doing with regard to, you know, diversity initiatives and things of that nature, then that's probably an indication that, you know, there may not be doing that much, or, you know, maybe that person across the table is not knowledgeable about what the firm is doing, and that could speak to firm culture as well. So just be open and honest. If that's something that is, you know, important to you, feel free to ask that.
Yeah, in general, to piggyback off what Tristan said, this is a good time where you can actually try to gain some clarification on biggest words like culture. So if a firm has any sort of bragging point about their culture, whether it's, you know, lots of diversity and inclusion, or they're, you know, very optimal, or et cetera, and then you can ask, well, how is this implemented? What do you mean by this in terms of firm culture?
Great. And Tristan actually touched on, you know, one of the next questions, which was, how can Black law students go about asking questions about a firm's diversity and inclusion priorities without feeling intimidated or like it may backfire?
Just do it. That's what I just do it. I mean, maybe from where I'm sitting, I can say that, but I've always been of the mindset that I'm just going to ask if it's important to me.
Yeah, I agree with Tristan. If it's important, you should ask it. And one thing I think that maybe is helpful to keep in mind is, as you're going through the interview process, that point where you get to ask questions is really, you should look at it as an opportunity to interview the firm. You know, they're interviewing you, of course, but at the same time, you're both there to figure out if this is going to be a good fit or not. And so, you know, to the extent that you want to know more about the firm, to the extent that diversity and inclusion is important, and I think it's important probably for most people who are here, feel free to ask those questions. I know most firms these days will prepare their interviewers, and, you know, interviewers are not you know, there are very few firms these days who are not making efforts to make diversity and inclusion a priority. And for interviewers, that's stressed upon them. And so, to what Tristan said, if an interviewer can't give you an answer on that, it's probably not a good sign. It might not be the firm you want to be at. I understand that there are obviously, you know, depending on the interviews, the number of interviews you have, there can be some different dynamics. But I would say, you know, thinking of it as your opportunity to interview them, at least from a mindset perspective, is a good way to maybe get rid of some of those nerves.
I would also say that firms, and corporate firms included, need to be asked these questions. And recruiters need to know that the talented and skilled individuals they want to hire care about these issues. So I just offer you confidence and support. And if that's something that matters to you, you know, bring it to the forefront. And you know, that doesn't mean you challenge the response they give, but it allows you to get the knowledge of, how is this person handling this question, and is it a place that I might be comfortable, feel supported in, and will diversity, is it even something being discussed? Don't be shy. Don't be shy.
Yeah, such great answers about diversity and inclusion. It's so important, especially in today's climate. So, you know, definitely important question to ask firms. And so I know that we have a little bit, just a few minutes left. So I just want to narrow down the questions. So how should students go about answering interview questions? Are there strategies? How much is too much? How much is too little? And is there anything students should not say in an interview?
I think you need to listen to the question and respond to what's being asked. When you're nervous, We have a tendency to ramble and miss the question entirely because we had things prepared in our mind. So listen to what's being asked, take that glass of water, and then respond to, and then don't feel the need to go on and on.
Yeah, I think if there's any strategy to, take into that, it's exactly that. Make sure you're actually, focused on actively listening, and, you're not trying to remember what you wrote down as some answers to some example questions. Be thoughtful in your answers. I think, it's certainly an opportunity to show some of your personality, and that's expected. Same time as an interview, so there is always a fine line and a balance of, saying too much, or I wouldn't say too much, but obviously, there are some things that, I would say in a conversation with Tristan, for example, that I probably wouldn't bring up in an interview. But I would think that, most people have that on their mind anyway.
The one thing I will say not to say is don't mention other firms or other places that you're interviewing at. I think that's in bad taste, and it's never going to go well for you.
Alistair, did you want to add anything?
Yeah, just in general, what I was saying earlier, if it just goes back to the narrative. If you can answer the question, actively listen, address it, and then if you can kind of try to tie it back to whatever narrative you're trying to paint about yourself, and kind of have that consistent theme, because you want to be remembered as a story. That's how people tend to remember things about you. So if you can do that, that's ideal.
All right, great. Thank you, guys. And so, as students gear up, to send in applications and get ready for the recruit, what are some final words of wisdom that you'd like to leave with them?
You have a place. You belong there. And I know it can really feel a lot. For me, I felt like a lot of times it was an outsider, and I kind of finessed my way into the interview. But no, you're brilliant, and if you've been accepted to law school, if you've gotten to a place where you're at the interviews, they know that you have value there. And law firms need you just as much as you need them. If it wasn't for the young recruits, these law firms would dry up. There's a huge, attrition rate at most of these firms. So they know they need young, fresh, talented blood. So I know it can, it feels like that's not the case. You feel like you're just a faceless applicant, but you're not. You have a place there, and you have a story, you have a narrative. Don't forget that. You deserve to be there, and don't let anyone make you feel otherwise. Even if one interview didn't go well, know your value first, and know that you deserve that, and you have a place there.
Yeah, I would just say don't be afraid to be your authentic self. I know we have sort of different, professional personalities, and we might adopt a persona for an interview, but I think, it shows when you're not being who you are. You also don't, come across as your most, positive and excited self when that's the case. I think, it's important for your interview performance to make sure you're focused on just being comfortable. At the same time, I think it's just important for your own well-being to, be comfortable in who you are and know that that's enough. It's kind of similar to what Alistair said.
I would just say you can never be too prepared. You read your resume and your cover letter 9 times, one more time, 10 times. I spent months doing cover letters and resumes. I spent, countless hours researching interviewers, and you have to remember the end goal. If your end goal is to get a position, you got to put the work in, and it will all pay out.
I would say to surround yourself with the people who also believe in you. That could be a professor, that could be a friend, a family member. For me, it was talking to my dad before I went into an interview, or knowing I was going to see people post-interview who were going to build me up and validate me. Surround yourself with those people who are giving you those positive words of wisdom and who believe in you, because sometimes we can have a lot of self-doubt.
Great. Thank you all so much, Jaclyn, Kyle, Elser, and Tristan. Thank you so much for this insightful discussion. And, as students, get ready to send in applications and, participate in the interview process, I know that they've heard great things from you and can really, utilize those things as they begin to prepare and be successful in the process as well. So thank you all so much.
Thank you.
It was a real treat. And I don't know, Tiana, if you're sending around our contact info, but please always feel free to reach out.
I will, if that's okay with you all. I can do that.
Absolutely.
Great. Okay. Thank you guys so much. And we have our government panel next, and I'm going to pass it on to Charles Campbell.
Thank you, Tiana. Good morning, everyone. Well, actually, it's afternoon. It's 12 p.m. Good afternoon, everyone. This is the government panel. I want to start off by saying thank you to everyone that was just a part of the panel before us. I think we got tremendous knowledge for all of us that will be participating in the recruit. Now, we are now a part of a panel that deals with more of a structured approach, I would say. So I'm going to ask all of the attendees to turn their minds to a different, outlook, a different perspective. Also, I want to start off by saying two things for just house cleaning purposes. First, this panel is being recorded, so students can watch it afterwards. We are trying to build a BLSA library so that more students can work in your space, be more informed, and also be able to reach out to you and develop a connection in the future. The second thing I'd like to say is that I am so lucky to be able to have one of my special 1Ls co-host with me. Christian, introduce yourself to everyone.
Hey everybody, I'm Christian Brown. I'm a 1L dual student, University of Windsor / University of Detroit Mercy. Just entering my second year, really excited to be here and join you guys today.
Thank you, Christian. All right, so just doing some brief introductions. I'll take 2 introductions and then Christian will do the final introductions and then we'll continue from there. This panel is going to be a little different in that every 5 minutes, we want to pause to give room for an audience question. I feel like that'll keep everyone engaged and also make sure that it's more of a discussion. So please, if you do have a question, shoot me a message. If you're comfortable, we can allow you to come on audio and just ask your question. We don't have to be the proxy to say it for you because we also want you to get the opportunity to meet some of these people will be your future interviewers. Hopefully some of them will even be your future colleagues. So with that being said, let's get right into it because time is well spent. The first person that we have on our panel today is Nancy Arnold. She's Senior Counsel in the Tax Law Services Division of the DOJ, Ontario Regional Office. Also, she's the Director of Student Programs for the Ontario Regional Office. And in the past 25 years, she's appeared before the Ontario courts, federal courts, represented the CRA, Canadian Revenue Agency, on various judicial review applications, motions, and actions. She also specializes in the areas of tax, bankruptcy and insolvency, creditors, remedies, tort, and civil litigation. She was called to the bar, the Quebec bar in 1996, and the Ontario bar in 1997. So please, Nancy, welcome from BLSA, Canada.
Thank you. Hello, everyone.
Thank you. The second person I'd like to introduce is my current boss and friend, Sarah Sheikh, Senior Counsel at the PPSC. She's a member of the Anti-Organized Crime Team, where she's responsible for prosecuting drug and terrorism offenses, as well as conducting appeals. She also teaches trial advocacy at Osgood's Intensive Trial Advocacy Workshop and at the Notre Dame Law School. Sarah, along with her colleagues, has been running the PPSC student program for 12 years and has done a tremendous job, because one thing with PPSC that I've seen is that a lot of people tend to stay at PPSC for many, many years. So that says a lot about their student recruitment and the people there. So I'd also like to introduce Sarah Sheikh, everyone.
Thanks, Charles. And I'm not your boss, I'm your colleague.
See right there, good job. All right, the remaining people, Christian, please take it away.
All right, so I'm gonna start off with Idorian Udu Orak. A Dorian is a lawyer with the Immigration Law Division of the DOJ ORO, called to the bar in 2018. He summered at the DOJ after second year in 2017, articled with the DOJ in 2018, and was hired as counsel in 2019. His practice mainly deals with judicial reviews of administrative decisions in the immigration and refugee context. He mainly appears at the federal court. He has also worked on large class actions, extradition files, and did some work on Vavilov. He is a Windsor Law graduate. Welcome.
Thank you. Hi everyone.
All right. The next person I'm going to introduce is Nefertari Kanadran. Nefertari Kanadran is legal counsel with the Department of Justice of Canada. She has been a member of the Ontario Bar since 2002. Nefertari started her legal career with the RCMP Legal Services, advising on commercial, human rights, as well as labor and employment files. She joined the Office of the Legal Advisor to the Department of National Defense, DND, and Canadian Armed Forces in 2017, gaining legal experience in intellectual property and national security issues, as well as developing expertise in military procurement law. After assignments to the DOJ legal files, including Public Services and Procurement Canada and the Canadian Border Services Agency, Nefertari returned to the RCMP legal team in 2019. She currently advises Canada's National Police Force on a variety of complex matters, including commercial, human rights, and privacy. After earning both her law degree and her Bachelor of Commerce degree at the University of Ottawa, Nefertari completed articles with the Ontario Ministry of the Attorney General. Away from work, she enjoys supporting community events and has previously volunteered with the St. Lucia Ottawa Association. Nefertari is currently co-chair of the Ottawa chapter of the Black Female Lawyers Network. Le Rousseau des Avocats Noirs. Excuse my French. Welcome.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me.
And then our last introduction is Jaclyn Beckels. Jaclyn is Senior Counsel with the Department of Justice of Canada, International Associate Group, where she has worked since 2009, practicing international criminal law. She holds degrees in both civil and common law from the University of Ottawa and has been a member of the Law Society of Ontario since 2003. Jaclyn practiced criminal law as a member of the Defense Bar in Ottawa from 2003 to 2006. In 2007, she had the opportunity to clerk for the Supreme Court of Barbados for 1 year and then work as a research fellow at the University of West Indies before returning to Ottawa in 2008 to resume her practice. In addition to her legal career, Jaclyn is a part-time professor at Algonquin College in the paralegal program and is currently the vice chair of the Law Society of Ontario's Equity Advisory Group. Welcome, Jaclyn.
Hi, can everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Awesome. So thank you everyone for being here. Thank you, Christian, for doing those introductions. So we're going to start off with the first few minutes doing something a little untraditional in panels. We're going to do an icebreaker, a few icebreaker questions. So I'm going to say your name, or I'll say your name, Christian will say your name. I'll say 3, Christian, you'll say 3. And then when I say your name, you just give me the first thing that comes to your mind, or either or. Okay, so we'll start off with what's the first thing that comes to your mind when I say X. Okay, so Nancy Arnold, what's the first thing that comes to your mind when I say a strong candidate?
Well, I'd say full package. So someone that has, strong analytical skills, strong soft skills, good judgment. Really, it's, there's not one thing, it's full package.
Nice. All right. Idorenyan, what's the first thing that comes to your mind when you hear top tier law schools? You're on mute.
Sorry. Yeah. So the first thing that I think would come to my mind is I think an often misapplied phrase. That's the first thing that I come to, because I don't think that there's any law school in Canada that precludes you from getting to where you want to go. And I think that you get a top tier education from pretty much any school here.
Awesome. Awesome. All right, and the final one, I'll throw to Jaclyn Beckels. Bad grades. What's the first thing that comes to your mind when you hear of bad grades? You're on
Not
mute.
fatal.
Not fatal. All right.
Not
Christian?
fatal.
All right, Sarah, I'm going to start with what's the first thing that comes to your mind when you hear extracurricular activities?
I would say that it's definitely good to have extracurricular activities, but it's definitely also not a deal breaker if you don't have any, because I know from a lot of students, and also from my personal experience, not everyone gets the opportunity to do extracurricular activities. Some people are working throughout law school. Some people need to pay for law school. So it is absolutely not a deal breaker if you don't have any, but if you have some, it's great to learn about you and learn about what makes you tick and what makes, what you want to do in your spare time. So I think there's two sides to that.
Thank you for that response. Next question to you, Nefertari. What comes to mind when you hear self-identifying as Black?
Hi, I thought about that a bit. I'm not, if I see that, I think of somebody that perhaps has faced some of the barriers that I might have faced. So I think of sort of that entire context. So I think perhaps having faced certain struggles and barriers, but and perhaps I might have something in common with this person. But it's essentially what I've been thinking.
Thank you for that. And then I'm gonna go back to Idorian here. What comes to mind when you hear involvement with a Black Law Students Association?
I think an opportunity to sort of get back to share my experiences and what I've learned with people who look like me and who might have faced some of the similar struggles or challenges, and that's really what I think it's about, trying to give back and trying to help the community out.
For sure. Thank you for that. All right, Charles, I'm gonna throw it to you.
All right, thank you, Christian. So now we're going into the either or question stage. I'll take these four and then Christian will start off with our real questions. So we're gonna start off with Nancy. Either or, Nancy, smarter student or student with a better attitude?
Definitely better attitude, because you can always learn the law, but it's really hard to change someone's attitude. So no doubt, better attitude.
Thank you. Thank you. All right, we're gonna go to Sarah. Sarah, either or, authenticity or presentation?
Authenticity, for sure. We're never looking for the person who does the best interview. We're looking for the best person, the best candidate. So there's very much a big difference between presentation and authenticity. So definitely, I would say authenticity for me.
Awesome. Okay. Jaclyn, either or, someone who can apply the law versus someone who questions the purpose of law or its effects on others. That's kind of a beefy one, but.
I would say both, but be careful. So what we want is somebody who can apply the law as it currently is, but is thinking critically enough to see what could be and who may challenge the law. But again, the carefulness there comes in because if you're constantly challenging the status quo, it can be exhausting both for you and your principal and other people that you're working with. So it's important to pick your battles.
Thank you. And Nefertari, you're going to round this one out for us. Nefertari, either or, someone that comes in with knowledge versus someone with a clean slate and willing to learn?
Hi, that it's a challenge as well to pick either or. I think there are pros and cons to both of that. it's funny because I know a lot of people who are coming in more and more sort of as mature students or people who have perhaps had other careers. And I find that fascinating, people who have all this experience. I think that really helps you to be a good student, a good lawyer. I think all of that prior experience can really inform that. So I like to see that where possible. That being said, I was the person who came in with zero, almost no prior, legal experience or otherwise. I did not have much experience. I was quite young when I came through. I was that clean slate person, and again, with working hard and you learn as much as you can as you go along. So I think really there's pros and cons to both. So I don't necessarily think one is better than the other. There's pros and cons, and what you don't know, you can learn on the job and pick up. And if you do have that prior experience, it's also helpful as well.
Awesome. All right, I'm going to pass it over to Christian to start us off with some of our more expansive questions.
All right, so the first question directed to the panel is, can someone explain the difference between the MAG, DOJ, and PPSC? Feel free to add on any more if you want, if you have or are currently working there.
Is this to everyone or anyone?
Yeah, it's the whole panel, anyone who kind of like to chime in.
Why don't you start, Sarah?
Sure. So I'll start with the difference between the PPSC and MAG. So the PPSC does federal prosecutions. So the criminal code is a federal statute, and we're responsible for prosecuting in the criminal code. But the federal government has delegated the large majority of those prosecutions to the province, to the ministry, and have capped the offenses that are considered sort of nationally more concerning. So the Controlled Drugs and Substances Act is what we primarily prosecute, as well as the anti-terrorism legislation. And then we also prosecute other federal statutes outside of the criminal code, like we do prosecutions under the Income Tax Act, we do frauds, we do prosecutions under the Copyright Act, the Environmental Protection Act, the Aeronautics Act. There's over 40 federal statutes that we prosecute outside of the criminal code. And in terms of MAG, there's Crown Law Office Criminal, and then there's the individual prosecution offices that are in various jurisdictions all over the province. And they prosecute all other offenses in the criminal code, like murder, rape, drinking and driving offenses, assaults, all of those other kinds of offenses they prosecute. And at 720 Bay, at Crown Law Office Criminal, it's sort of the head office of the province. And there they do all of the appeals in the Ontario Court of Appeal in relation to their offenses. And they also do large scale, like big sort of prosecutions. Having said that, like the PPSC, we also do appeals. So we're a trial and an appellate office. We do all of the appeals in the Ontario Court of Appeal, and we also appear at the Supreme Court of Canada. I'll let Nancy talk about the civil section in terms of the Department of Justice and the civil side of MAG, perhaps.
Sounds good. So the DOJ is a law firm for all of the federal client departments. So the DOJ is only civil. As Sarah has said, if you're interested in the criminal side, it's the PPSC that handles all criminal matters, federal criminal matters, whereas the DOJ is purely civil. So, the counterpart of that is that MAG is the law firm for the provincial departments. So it's federal versus provincial. Within DOJ, so how DOJ is organized is that we have the main office in Ottawa. I call it the mothership. The mothership is in Ottawa. So if you're interested in doing policy or legislative reform, that all takes place in Ottawa. But we have also regional offices, and Dorian and I work in Toronto at the Ontario Regional Office of the DOJ, and that is primarily, if not almost exclusively, litigation. And how I explain it is that there wouldn't be regional offices if you could sue the federal crown in Ottawa. We only have lawyers in regional offices of the DOJ because actions and applications can be started wherever the plaintiff or the applicant lives. So, for instance, in Toronto, we represent we do all litigation in all of Ontario, any litigation that's initiated against any federal department. And how we're separated within the DOJ regional offices is by the clients who we represent. So I'm in the Tax Law Services Division because we represent exclusively Canada Revenue Agency. And we have 3 other divisions that are, again, separated along the lines of the clients who we represent. And that's how it is in all of the regional offices. So regional offices are mainly litigation, policy, and legislative reform takes place in Ottawa. I think MAG is structured similarly in that they're the lawyers, they're the law firm for all the provincial matters. So if you sue, one of the provincial departments, it goes to MAG. MAG represents that department's interest. That's how it's separated. Anything else, Dorian, that you'd like to add?
Yeah, no, so just to add on to that point is, just to talk about in terms of, maybe some of the hiring that the DOJ does, just because, as Nancy, you said, there are 4 different divisions there. So, we don't tend to go as focused when we're looking at candidates because we are, hiring for a number of different divisions. So yeah, we're a little bit broader in terms of who we're looking for that way.
Sorry, if I could just correct something maybe. I'm a criminal lawyer and I work with DOJ. So it is not exclusively civil. I work in the International Assistance Group. We do extraditions, mutual legal assistance, which is international criminal law. We assist prosecutors in the country and in foreign countries in obtaining evidence from Canada, Canadian prosecutors in obtaining evidence from foreign countries. And on the extradition side, we return people who are sought for prosecution and for enforcement of sentence to countries where they've committed crimes. And similarly, we seek Canadians or non-Canadians who've committed crimes in Canada from foreign countries.
Thank you, Jackie, for that clarification. You're right. The extradition little group is the one criminal area. Very true.
Oh, I could give my 2 cents as well.
Go on.
Hi, can everyone hear me?
Yeah.
Hi, so I just wanted to, I articled for MAG, and then I've come back to the Department of Justice. I've been counsel for several years here. So for MAG and also for the Department of Justice, the role that I play, it's almost a little bit like in-house counsel. So I've worked in the legal service unit, so I'm advisory counsel. So I have had the chance to work in different legal services sections and work directly, be co-located with different client departments. So I'm in Ottawa right now. One client department I worked a lot for was the Department of National Defence and the Canadian Forces. So I was co-located at D&D and with the forces. We worked closely with JAG. I had many clients in uniform, civilians. I worked closely with the Army and with the Air Force. And I was a commercial lawyer for many years, specializing in military procurement and advising national defense and the forces. Right now, I'm in another legal services unit of DOJ. So I'm co-located with the RCMP at RCMP headquarters. I mean, we're all working from home now, but so essentially I give legal advice exclusively to the RCMP. So DOJ has a lot of these legal services units that are placed in the different, almost every federal department and agency has one. And MAG has a setup like that as well. The various different ministries, Ontario ministries will have a legal services team that gives them legal advice as well that's not litigation based. So I just wanted to put that out there.
Yeah, and actually that's just to picking up on that, DOJ also has legal services at CSIS, which I think is a very interesting job. So frequently I work with them on terrorism cases because they are advising CSIS. And so we deal directly with those lawyers, and they are federal employees working for the Department of Justice in Ottawa.
Awesome. So anyone that's applying to government in this cycle, please rewatch the last 10 minutes of what was just said, because it sparsed out what everyone else is doing. And in the interview, every interview, they're gonna ask you, why not work for the province? What do you know about PPSC? What do you know about MAG? What do you know about DOJ? Sarah's smiling because she asked me that question. And so that last 10 minutes really sparsed it out extremely well. And thank you everyone for chiming in. The next question, since we're just gonna organically go there, the next question that I'll ask, and I'll jump a little bit down in the question list if you're following along. So essentially, can someone speak briefly, and everyone here can speak briefly about the application process for the organization? And again, other panelists feel free to chime in. So I'll start off with Nancy. Can you speak briefly about the application process for the DOJ? And then Sarah, and then we can go across the board.
Okay, so but I'll speak only to the application process to our Ontario regional office, because it's different, as you've just heard. You know, Ottawa is different, operates differently than the regions, and the regions are litigation based. So necessarily, what we look for in an applicant is, you know, someone that's interested in government, someone that's interested in litigation, and I look very closely to your cover letter. So for writing skills, and we do look at grades, but you know, it's effectively a benchmark. So those are the three things. And an application, when I'm reviewing an application, I'm looking at, you know, whether you genuinely have an interest in government and genuinely an interest in litigation. So what I would say is that take the time to draft your cover letter and tailor it to, and I think that's true for wherever you apply, whether frankly it's the private sector or any of the specific government department or the DOJ. Tailor your cover letter so that it speaks to what we do. And so speak to your interest in litigation, speak to your interest in government, and you know, highlight that and take the time to write, you know, a letter that's persuasive. It's almost an exercise in persuasion, in a format that is concise but yet comprehensive. So at the ORO, we do put a lot of stock on the cover letter, because it's my way to determine whether you're authentic in your desire to be at our shop. So I think I'll leave Sarah to speak to the PPSC.
Sure. So essentially, you know, like what I said earlier, you know, we're looking for, you know, not the person who, you know, presents, you know, the best on paper or who, you know, does the best in the interview. We're just looking for an all-around person, someone who's got a positive attitude, and has a demonstrated sort of interest in what we do, because obviously you have to like what we do. So similar to what Nancy said, I mean, you know, what we look for in the application process is we just ask for a cover letter and your CV. So in the application, what we look for is people who know who are applying to us. So they don't say, dear government law firm or dear Department of Justice, I'm applying to your organization. No, we're the PPSC. So we're looking for someone who knows that they're applying to us, and someone who has sort of demonstrated that they've looked at our website, they kind of know the law that we practice, and you know, someone who just is able to present themselves and who they are in one page. So try not to go over a page in your cover letter. No one likes to turn the page. Lawyers have a very short attention span, or at least I do. So no one's going to want to read a book in your cover letter. But definitely we just look for someone who can communicate well and communicate clearly and doesn't have any spelling errors in their cover letter, and doesn't and basically is able to explain why they're interested in us. And for us, it would be criminal law and litigation. And even if they don't have a background in it, it doesn't matter. There's a number of reasons why you could be interested in our work. All you have to do is find what speaks to you and what is drawing you to apply to us, and communicate that clearly. That's basically it.
Thank you for those responses. We have a question from the audience. Alicia Ray has asked the panel, how important is bilingualism? And I'll ask that to anyone who can kind of chime in on the panel.
Sure, I'll just jump in there. It's not important. It's if you are bilingual, it's an asset for sure, but it's not something that we look for, because in Ontario, the vast majority of our practice is in English. 100%, everyone has a constitutional right to have their trial in one of the official languages of Canada, and French is one of the official languages. So we definitely need a pool of people that we can draw from in our office who can step in and do a trial in French. We do have fully bilingual people in our office. So I guess my message is, if you don't speak French, it's okay, don't worry. It's not a mandatory requirement, and you won't be excluded because of that. However, if you do speak French, wonderful. You get a little, tick beside you, but it's not going to make or break you.
I would agree with Farah with respect to DOJ, but it depends on where you're applying, and I'm mindful of the fact that students might be across the country. So what I will say is, if you're in Quebec or Ottawa, it is a serious asset. It's not essential, but it is a very significant asset, especially if you want to have a future with the department. Once you get to the more senior levels, you can't be promoted unless you can speak the languages of all the people working under you. So you will need at some point to have French, especially Montreal, Ottawa, Toronto, maybe less so, BC, maybe less so. New Brunswick is another place where we see a lot of people needing French. Sorry, Neffy, I didn't mean to cut you off there. Go ahead.
That's okay. I apologize. I'm doing this on my phone and I can't see all the squares. I agree with Jaclyn. I think it depends, and per office, I mean, it will be probably less important in Toronto. It will be pretty important. Ottawa is the national capital region. It will be pretty important there. I think a demonstrated, I mean, obviously, if you are bilingual and you speak French, definitely that's very important. If you're not bilingual, if you have there's different levels of bilingualism. I'm sure many people have heard about sort of the various government French testing. There are different levels. I think it's helpful if you have show what you do have, if you have taken some courses, if you have some ability to speak or understand French. Definitely what becomes important as well is a willingness to learn. I know that sometimes I don't know that that's possible for articling students, but at some point, like if you are looking to make a career with the Department of Justice in a bilingual region, a willingness to learn. We're definitely looking for people who are more interested in improving their second language, as opposed to sometimes people think, well, I'm not interested, I don't want to learn, I'm never learning that other language. That's a bit of a limitation. It will be a limitation on your career.
Oh, and sorry if I can just wrap that up or add. In my group in particular, this is kind of outside of the articling realm, because we also take summer students and we take like second year who want to come in and work through the year, and people who are working with DOJ as a course. So we've got students kind of all the time if you speak other languages and you want to work with the international assistance group, we will love that. So we always have a need for either Spanish speakers or somebody who speaks Eastern European languages, because we get stuff we get it in English and in French, but sometimes it's a really poor translation. So if you can speak the native language, if you can speak Chinese, Mandarin, Cantonese, Japanese, like, please send me your CV.
All right, thank you, Jaclyn, for that response, and to all our other panelists. Jaclyn, I'm going to give this next question to you as well. How do government recruiters assess candidates at the in-person interview stage?
That's an interesting question. Government interviews are really DOJ interviews, I'll speak for DOJ. Our interviews are very almost formulaic. So you'll be met with a panel of, I believe, 3 panelists and 1 HR person. The panel has pre-prepared questions. And in fact, you've gotten the pre-prepared questions. You come in for the interview a half an hour before you meet with the panel, you're given the questions. And you get a half an hour to sit down, read them, reflect on them, start preparing your thoughts. I believe for articling interviews, there's also a presentation, a 10-minute presentation that you get to do. And all of that, you're informed of that in advance. So you get to prepare your presentation, you come in and do a 10-minute presentation for the board. And then you go into the interview questions. So half an hour to prepare. The interview itself is between 45 minutes to an hour for you to answer those questions at your own pace. So the board doesn't cue you in terms of time or anything like that. So you're going through it, and what the panel is really looking for is there are substantive questions for government interviews, just so you know. And those substantive questions are largely based on policy decisions that have been recently made, laws that have recently been amended, and based on your background as it is in law, which is you're learning up to that point, but you're also asked to talk about something current. So those 3 websites that I put in the chat, know them, reflect on them, think about what the government is doing. Think about any decisions that they've recently have made, anything that you've seen in the media that they've been talking about fairly frequently. These are high profile things that are important to the department, and the interview should reflect that. You will also be asked situational questions. So things that demonstrate your judgment, your integrity, your interpersonal skill, your ability to work well with others. So a general, kind of generic government question would be something like, it's 4:30 on a Friday afternoon and you're asked to do X and Y and Z, and the person who asked you to do it has left at 3 o'clock and you run into trouble. What do you do? Like that kind of thing. Or, you're supposed to be working with another articling student and that articling student decides, nah, they're not really going to carry their end of the work. How do you handle that situation? Those are kind of the typical questions that we see, just to see how you respond, how you think. And it really is rarely about solving the problem as much as it is about how you solve the problem, if that makes sense. So,
Thank you for that.
What steps and et cetera.
Great. Thank you for the great insight. Really appreciate it.
I'm going to jump in just to, because I think it's a little, I agree with most of what Jaclyn has said in terms of the format and what we're trying to test, but it's a little different at the ORO in terms of the process. We do test all of the type of criterias that Jaclyn has indicated, and those are usually publicly available. So you'll know, that it's interpersonal skills, judgment, initiative, analytical skills. We don't, our process is a little different in that it's 2 sets of interviews with 2 lawyers. And the first interview, you'll get the questions once you get to the room. We will ask the questions, but you'll also have an opportunity to read them if you want to. So they're not in advance. The only issue or the only difference is that for the analytical question, we send it 7 days in advance. So what we do is we give the student a full 7 days, to prepare the analytical question, because we recognize that, you might not necessarily know the area of the law that we're asking. And what we're really looking for is to test your ability to concisely synthesize the problem and answer it in a coherent and succinct manner. That is really what we're looking at. Usually the question is going to be a question that there's not necessarily a right or wrong answer. We're really trying to evaluate how you explain the problem, and how you get to the conclusion.
Perfect. Thank you for that answer.
And if I could just,
for sure.
I just wanted to jump in, since we were just talking about the interview process, and I just wanted to underscore this point, which seems obvious in retrospect, but not always. Is that public interest and social justice are not the same thing. And I think, sometimes students tend to think that the two things are basically one and the same. And, the government is very much on the public interest front, and doesn't mean that there's no overlap with social justice. But, for that interview, I think you want to be clear that, you're not coming in thinking that if you're demonstrating and you're talking about social justice, that's satisfying all the criteria for public interest.
Perfect. Thanks, Idorian. I'm actually going to pose the next question to you. Kind of along those same lines, how would you describe the articling experience at your office?
The articling experience okay. So I would say it was very, very good. I articled at the Ontario Regional Office, and as part of the articling program, we rotate through the 4 divisions. So, it just to tie in from the point that I made earlier, to say that, the recruitment is looking for, well-rounded general interest, because, the idea is that you do get this opportunity to rotate through all the different divisions. Like I rotated through the tax division, the Aboriginal, I'm currently working in immigration, but I also went through lead. So I was just exposed to a variety of different types of work, and I had the opportunity to run my own trial when I was when I was rotating through tax. So I would say that my experience was that the articling was very well organized. There's a number of benchmarks and criteria that and sort of experiences that the Department of Justice is committed to making sure that all the students get. And also because the DOJ, especially the Ontario Regional Office, they get a lot of big files, and the students are given the opportunity to work on those. That's how I got my hands on Vavilov. It was it was working its way through our office when I was articling, and I was able to contribute just a tiny bit to that. So, I say, like, the DOJ, it's, my articling experience was fantastic. There's a lot of very interesting work. I find that they are committed to your success. The idea is not to throw you into the deep end and see if you sink or swim. The idea is to give you the skills to basically learn and to build yourself up. So, to the extent that this is turning into sort of a referendum on my workplace, it was fantastic.
That's great. Thank you for that. Nefertari, would you be able to share your experience working at MEG, or what the articling experience would be like working at MEG?
Yes, hi. I do preface it by saying that I articled like 18, 19 years ago. So I do encourage people just in general to reach out, whether it's through this organization or however you can, reach out to people who have articled a bit more recently, just in general, there are a lot of lawyers who have, articled in the last, 4 or 5, 6, whatnot years. So don't be afraid to do that. And as we've seen with the sort of the different regions, different offices of DOJ and everywhere else as well, if you can find somebody to talk to informally, directly, because we all have sort of a different flavor or what they're looking for. So I think that can be some helpful information as well. But in terms of articling at MAG, it was great. I was in Toronto, so that's the Ontario government. I was in a legal service unit. I think MAG takes lots and lots of articling students. I think there were 50 of us, and they had some nice, at that time, some nice opportunities to get together with the different articling students. Even you might be the only one in your sort of little office, but it was nice that you could get to know the other students. So I thought that was great. One thing, I guess, anecdotally that I've compared with friends of mine, those of us working in government versus in firms, I find that in government sometimes we're thrown, which ends up being a good thing. You're sort of you're given a lot of opportunities to do things, I guess, hands-on. Sometimes you might. I was brought. I had great mentors at MAG and at DOJ later on. I was brought to client meetings. So coming out of law school and that sort of academic, experience, and you're reading about things, it was great. I appreciated that, being brought to meetings with clients to hear. These are clients, representing departments. They have real problems, and it's nice to hear sort of what the concerns are, what the issues are, and then you can go back to your office later and do that research. So it gives you better context, and sort of, it was a nice introduction as to this is what you will be doing as a government lawyer. So I appreciated sort of having that hands-on opportunity to interact with real clients, real people, or if somebody was briefing somebody more senior, they would bring me with them, even if I was just there to observe. But I liked that. And I worked my major rotation with MAG. So it was, at the time, the department was called Management Board Secretariat. And I was with a team of maybe 12 commercial and procurement lawyers. So I was the articling student, and then I worked for all 12 of those lawyers. So you get a bit of a variety, you learn how to sort of balance different projects. So I really enjoyed it. I had 2 rotations, I'll end with that. So I did have a litigation rotation. I was less geared towards that, but it was also, it was a great experience to sort of, they were human rights and labor litigators. So I at least got to have that litigation support experience. And so it was great.
Perfect. Thank you for that response. We have another audience question. I'm going to direct it to Sarah. Sarah, if you could please explain the difference between a criminal cover letter and a corporate cover letter.
Sure. Just really quickly, we were talking about the interview process, and I know that it's very different depending on all government places that you're working with. I just wanted to emphasize that at least, it's very different in terms of where you're applying and what region you're applying to. So just really quickly with the PPSC, I'm from the Ontario Regional Office. We participate in the on-campus interview process that's governed by the Law Society of Ontario. We also participate in the articling recruitment procedures that are governed by the Law Society of Ontario. So all of the timelines and guidelines are there. We also list our jobs at www.jobs.gc.ca, so you can sign up for alerts there. Our interview process, specifically, we try to be as less structured as possible. We're trying to move away from a very structured interview and have a very relaxed sort of interview where we try to have an opportunity to get to know you as a person and as an individual. And if anyone has any questions about that, they can feel free to reach out to me. We also recruit internationally. I know someone asked that. We do take applications from international students who are participating through the National Committee on Accreditation. So we do not discriminate in terms of from where you are at all. So we will recruit from across the country and outside of the country as well. Personally, I'm an international student as well. So I didn't go to law school in Canada. So we're very open to that. And you asked me a question about a cover letter between corporate and PPSC, is that right? The differences? So quickly, I would say that, you know, I'm not really sure what private firms look for in a cover letter, to be honest with you. Maybe given that their recruitment is more about, you know, someone who can, you know, I guess recruit clients. That's probably the kind of person they're looking for. We are looking more for people who are just interested in criminal law. And I would imagine that all other government agencies are just looking for someone who has a genuine interest in the work that they do. So that's probably a similarity too, because maybe corporate firms like that as well. But my main tip is to always govern your or approach your cover letter very individually to the place that you're applying to, and not a generic cover letter where you just take out the dear and replace it and have the same cover letter for everyone. So like I said earlier, we like to look, we like to see people who have even just said, look, your website says this and this really interests me. Or I know that you do this kind of work in the Supreme Court and your office has done this kind of work in the Court of Appeal. That interests me. I'm interested in these particular teams in the office. So as soon as we see that, we know that someone has taken 5 minutes out of their day, looked at our website, and done a little bit of research, and then that tells us that they care about their application. And so that strikes us a lot, I think. So, you know, I don't know if that's a difference, to be honest with you, between corporate and government. I'm not sure what they look for. I never applied to a corporate private firm before, but I can tell you that that's what we look for in a cover letter. Spelling errors, make sure you check that. And then the other thing that we've seen a few times is sometimes when people do track changes, we have received cover letters that have the track changes still in there. So there is a way, figure it out. There is a way that you can actually remove all of those from your document before you send it. So, you know, make sure that's gone as well. And that's about it. I'm not sure if that assists, but those are my tips for a cover letter.
Thank you.
I'd like to jump in relatively quickly because we do have 5 minutes. And first and foremost, thank you everyone for being here and speaking. I was messaging Tia and I said, man, next time we have to make this a hour-and-a-half panel at least. So I just wanted to ask questions in a way now where it's just let's try to get it into 1 to 2 sentences so we can maximize, because I think there's some questions here that I think are going to be very critical for students applying in this process. For example, one of the most important ones is, can we get 3 tips from 3 different panelists on advice you'd give to excel in a virtual interview? I think we're in COVID. A lot of our interviews are going to be socially distant. So can we get 3 tips from 3 different panelists, doesn't matter who, on tips on how you can thrive in a virtual interview?
Shall I go first?
Go ahead, Nancy.
Just make sure that you're in a secure area where, you know, you're not going to have, for instance, your cat running through the computer, like that you don't have distractions and that, you know, you don't have animals barking. So pick your location so that you have no distractions.
I would say, I mean, obviously, I'm not going to say about your internet or anything like that, but check your background and check your lighting. Because if you have light coming from behind you, it will, like, we won't be able to see you. So make sure the light the lighting is good, you know, and your sound is on, and sort of log in 5 minutes beforehand. So we just did an interview process. It was completely over Zoom. And the only, and sometimes they're all timed, right? They're all going to be timed. So when yours ends, there's another interview that starts. So don't be late, and test your connection, test your lighting, test your screen, make sure they can see you, make sure they can hear you, and log on early.
I'm going to build on what Sarah just said in terms of time. pace yourself. Pay attention to your camera, not so much in how you look, but in what your interviewers are doing. And that's an interview tip both in person as well as virtually. If they cannot take notes and keep track of what it is that you're saying, then what you're saying can be lost, and they cannot give you credit for what you've said. For the government, it is the government of Canada, or the DOJ. It's a point system, so they give you points based on your responses, and if they're not taking note of your responses, you're not getting those points. In my experience, people finish much sooner than they expect to. They don't use their time very wisely, and after half an hour or 15 minutes, they're done. They're out of there. You've got 45 minutes to an hour. Use it.
Awesome. Thank you so much for those responses. The next one, I'm going to try to see if we can sneak in 3 more here. The next question I have is, how do government recruiters assess candidates in the in-person interview stage? But since it's virtual, we can skip that. And probably I'll just send an email so we can have it banked as information. One weird question, probably not so weird. What is the learning curve at your office? I think a lot of students are coming in thinking that, oh man, I have to make sure I'm the smartest person here. But is there an understanding that there's a significant learning curve? I know for PPSC there is, and I'm pretty sure it's every other government office there is.
If I can start on this one, if you don't mind. When you're coming straight out of law school, you don't know anything yet. We don't expect you to know anything yet. And a lot of us work in very specialized areas of law. So we expect that you have a baseline understanding of, for example, in criminal law, we expect that you understand a little bit of the charter and, what is an indictable offense versus what is a summary conviction offense. But other than like really the basics, we are there to teach you. Your articling period of time is for you to be trained. We don't expect you to know the answers. And in fact, the work that you're going to be given is usually the stuff that we can't figure out ourselves. So you're going to be getting some hard questions during that time that you then need to do research and learn and to kind of teach us. Because if we knew the answer, we wouldn't give you the question.
All right. I think that summed it up really well. I want to thank everyone for coming out. The time is 1 o'clock. And before I give it to Steph, I wanted to ask if, 2 people, I'll select Nefteri, and who else will jump in after? I don't really have anyone on top of my mind right now, probably Idorendian. Just give 30 seconds of encouragement to articling students that are planning to, or potential articling students that will be applying in this cycle, to just really manage their expectations, and any kind of words of advice you can give. And then Stephanie, you can take over right after they speak. Oh, you're on mute. You're on mute.
Sorry, my apologies. Still figuring it all out.
No
I would say, thank you for that. I would say be confident, be positive, focus on what you do bring to the table, not on what you don't. I mean, it's sort of, we are where we are. If you're an A+ student, that's great. If you're not, that's okay too. You have other things, focus on what you do bring to the table. Be positive, be strong. I would say cast the net widely. I'm sure, hopefully people are doing that anyways. Sometimes we get focused and people say, I want to work for DOJ, or I want to work for this organization or that. If you, it's tough times. If you care about government, there are lots of different government organizations out there. I don't know if some of the agencies, boards, and tribunals, like maybe the Human Rights Commission hires, separately. Do your research. The City of Toronto, the City of Mississauga, there's lots of different government opportunities out there, so I would say cast your net widely. In terms of virtual interviews, we all have whatever, FaceTime or do something, get your friend, do a video conference with your friend and do like a bit of a mock ahead of time so that your friend can tell you, your background looks terrible, the lighting's horrible. And I would say it's hard virtually, but smile. Try to still make that connection with the people. I smile a lot. Try to make that connection with the people through the camera anyways, because at the end of the day, I think we're all looking for good, well-rounded people. It's harder virtually, but you can still do it. So those are my thoughts.
All right, thank you for that. Thank you for sharing, really appreciate it. I want to thank each and every one of our panelists, Nancy, Dorian, Sarah, Jaclyn, Nefertari, for joining us today, giving us some very valuable insight and knowledge that I'm sure can be applied to all students. We're going to be applying this articling cycle. As it is 1 o'clock, we'll be passing it on to my colleague, Steph. Take it away.
Thank you.
Thanks, Christian. Thanks, Charles. So as we move on to our last panel, we're going to shift the focus a little bit. We're going to have a Northern perspective from Miss Farah Pottinger, as she's here from Thunder Bay. And then we're going to have a perspective, or two perspectives, from recent articling students, Logan and Danielle. So I'm going to start off with bios. So firstly, we have Miss Farah Pottinger. She is a partner at Wheeler, Maloney, Nelson in Thunder Bay, Ontario. She joined Wheelers in 2006, was called to the bar in 2007, has been a partner since 2017, and a co-managing partner since 2018. She practices primarily in the areas of corporate and commercial law, real estate, wills and estates, and estate litigation. So hello, Ms. Pottinger. You can just wave and let everyone know who you are. Thank you. Next, we have Danielle Rawlinson. She articled at Monkhouse Law, a boutique employment law firm in Toronto's downtown core. She was called to the bar in June of 2020, so congratulations for that, and is now a first-year associate at the firm. Danielle was the 2018-2019 BLSA Canada National President and passionately believes that mentorship for Black students is integral to their success in the profession. So Danielle, you can just wave and let everyone know. Hi, thank you. And last but not least, we have Logan Anderson. Logan was born and raised in Windsor, Ontario. He completed his JD at the University of Windsor Faculty of Law, where he volunteered with community legal aid during law school. Logan worked for the Windsor Crown's Attorney's Office as both a summer student and an articling student. And he loves his community, and his ultimate goal is to be a criminal lawyer in Windsor. So hello, Logan. Okay, and I just wanted to also reiterate that we have the breakout sessions after this panel from 2 to 2:30. So again, viewers, if you have any burning questions that you'd like to ask, and let's say you don't want to do it right now, you can wait till our breakout session will be put in breakout rooms with the panelists, and you can ask them private questions there if you would like. So I'm just going to begin with, let's say, our two recent articling students. So as I did mention, Danielle, you articled at Monkhouse Law, and Logan, you were at the Windsor Crown Attorney's Office. So the first question is, was your articling employment secured through the 2L recruitment, or did you go through the formal articling recruitment? And anyone can answer this.
I guess I'll start. So my articling was not secured through the formal recruitment process, although I had multiple articling interviews through that process. I kind of had to keep my head up and keep pushing forward after not being offered any articling positions during from 2L or even the articling process. I kind of just took it upon myself to hit the ground running and apply and continue to apply after. And it just so happened that this available position was here for me, and I ended up getting my articling post-articling and post-2L, so the articling process rather.
As for myself, I certainly went through the formal recruitment process. The way the timing worked out for the Crown's office, at least at Windsor, although I had already been hired on for the summer student position, I hadn't actually begun working yet when the articling ones were, the written aspect was due. I do feel, however, though, that my time as a summer student, of which I was probably 2 months into it when the interview started, I feel that gave me a distinct advantage in terms of securing articling, because I just had established that familiarity with the interviewers by that point. But they were very explicit to me nonetheless that even though I was the summer student, that there was no guarantee that I'd receive the articling position. So it was still fairly competitive right to the very end.
Okay, thank you for your responses. I'm going to pass this question to Ms. Pottinger. So since we're talking about the articling recruitment, what would you say are some characteristics that an ideal articling student should possess? Yes.
Hi. All right, so ideal candidates. What the North is a little bit different, I think, sometimes because there's a little bit of boldness that kind of needs to go on up here. You will definitely get more diversity in terms of the work product that you will get. And you have to, because the practices tend to be smaller with smaller numbers of lawyers in them. My firm is considered big and it only has 12 lawyers. 13 actually right now. So that means that you have to be a little bit bolder about seeking out things that are interesting to you and pursuing tasks that are keen. The neat part though is that you also get to do bigger and bolder stuff sometimes, different projects, I think, than just doing research or just doing one particular practice area, which can be a lot of fun, but it also can be a little overwhelming and you have to know when you can speak out and speak. So that's sort of a degree of boldness is definitely required. You know, always the usual basics of good at work ethic, you know, people who are, you know, good at getting on with the office. I think with smaller places, you're more integral with staff and you spend a lot of time talking to and working with other staff and other students as well. And willing to work on seeking out connections with the lawyers in the office. And I think also just generally enthusiasm, which sounds insane, but if you hide in the office we give you and don't much express, you're not going to get the interesting work. Nobody thinks about you. So if you make an effort to connect with the others in the office, the staff and the lawyers, you're more likely to be thought of, to be included, and to get the more interesting assignments. So there's a degree to which actually just the personality sometimes matters a little bit more even than sort of your history of grades or things like that, which I think sometimes makes the North a little different.
Thank you for that. So I know we just talked about the ideal candidate. So let's move on to the application package, and this can be answered by either any of you three. So what are some features for the two articling students that you applied in your application package, for example, cover letter or resume, that you believe set yourself apart from your peers? And Ms. Pottinger in general, what are some features that you look for in the application package that screams out like ideal candidate once again?
I guess I could start. I think for me in my article, like my CVs, I really try to focus on highlighting skills through the experiences that I had. I know we're going to probably get to this question a little bit later, but I was very focused on a particular area of law. So I kind of built my resume and did different, you know, clinics and I had different experiences that I think built my resume to cater to a certain area of law. So I was able to really highlight certain skills, you know, analytic skills, drafting, communicating, you know, going to tribunals or different things, settlement conferences. I was really able to like speak about those skills within my CV and the small space that you have, highlighting those skills. So I think that was really useful for me, just kind of like hammering in all of the experiences I had to highlight those skills. Obviously, I had someone review my CV, a lawyer, to make sure that it made sense and that it wasn't overkill in regards to the things that I was putting in there. But I think it really helped to kind of highlight skills by putting in interesting experiences.
I would definitely echo that same sentiment. Essentially, and I was actually told by one of the interviewers afterwards that what they believe set me apart was my passion. And I think the best way to highlight your passion comes from highlighting your experiences. So, I mean, we're all pretty familiar with the way that law schools curve the grades, and it's not too uncommon for all the applicants to have fairly decent grades. So what sets you apart from everybody else when you're all about the same in terms of grades? Again, the experiences. So for the Crown Attorney's Office, most of my volunteering throughout law school, like you mentioned, community legal aid was a big one. And another one was mooting. I tried to get into a moot team every single year because, I mean, at the end of the day, you're an articling student. You're still a student. You're expected to still be learning. And somebody with experience under their belt and maybe not the highest grades can still learn just like anybody else. So whereas the alternative is not always the same, right? You may have high grades, but if you're, still nervous speaking in front of groups, it might hinder you in a way. And I mean, I can speak for those in the chat who are, maybe a little concerned about signing up for a moot team or joining community legal aid. You really will have to experience it to get comfortable with it. And anytime you can get yourself in front of a judge or a tribunal or a mock judge or a mock tribunal, it's something that highlights your interest in doing that. And so especially when the interviews came around, I know this is about the package, the application package itself, but I always tried to emphasize, that this is what I want to do, this is the type of law I want to do, and these are the experiences I've done that as close as possible I can to that, essentially.
Well, from my perspective, we generally interview any articling student applies to us as long as it's in a timely fashion, because we don't actually get that many up this way. So we always give everybody the courtesy of at least a good interview. What we're often really interested in is generally speaking, not just the things you do for school, but also the things that you're passionate about. If you're passionate about community work, you're passionate about a certain area or organization you're involved with, we want to see that you really care about something and put some effort into it. The scholastic stuff, the moot teams, that's all awesome. The more you can get into your work product, great. But we also want to see if we have you come up all the way up here, that means you have to get involved in the community. You have to care about the community. So what is interesting to you? What is interesting about you? What's important to you? We kind of want to see that a little bit because the grades are all pretty similar. We're looking for what's interesting about you personally and whether or not we feel like you would enjoy living here and enjoy the type of community we have here.
If I could just echo or jump onto that as well. I actually agree with that, definitely. I remember when I was drafting my first CV, and at that point, I think I was just the BLSA conference chair at that time. And I think I had just became the president, and I was like, I don't know if I'm going to put BLSA and highlight it in the CV. It's on my resume, but I'm not sure. And I remember a lawyer who was reviewing it, and this was a white male lawyer, was like, why is BLSA at the bottom of your CV? Highlight your leadership skills, highlight the fact that you are the figurehead of this national organization that does so much for Black law students in the community as a whole. So I do echo that as well, highlight your passions and other things that you do outside of law school. So yeah, that's amazing.
So
sorry, if I could echo onto that echo as well. Like she said, you might not realize some of the things on your CV are as, I guess, advantageous as you might believe them. So it's all how you sell yourself in a way too. I mean, my work experience was 10 years in the fast food industry, but when I told them about it, it was about, working with people from different walks of life, communicating with different people, ensuring people are, satisfied with your service and, just, and of course, like Ms. Pottinger said, getting out in the community is a big part, showing that you care. So volunteering Big Brothers Big Sisters is a great one. I always recommend that to people if you have the time, but anything that gets you out there, whether or not you're paid to do it, volunteering is a fantastic way to get that experience.
Great, thank you. So with that point, as we've all just spoke about passion and experience, I know due to the pandemic, many individuals face particular challenges, in particular getting offers rescinded from firms that may have hindered their 2L experience. So how can students set themselves apart now as they go on to this process and during the interview stage? How can they sort of change their story to at least speak to experiences that they may have had in the past or what they did this summer, even if it wasn't anything legal?
Ooh, I guess I can take that one. It's a little interesting here because our office never 100% closed and our articling and summer students all came in and we've had people all the way through, but I know from our students, because one of them comes from U of T, that was not the case for most of her classmates. Most of her cohort did not have the same experience she did. So we actually did, but it was unusual, I guess. And but so it's like anything else. If something's different about it, tell us what you did do. Tell us what was interesting to you. Tell us how you handled this really weird time period in history. What did you do with yourself? Did you try to help out in certain ways? Did you try to take care of your family? Everything counts as to, this is the strangest time I think anybody's had in history of sort of articling in the last 100 years. So what did you do and how did you cope with it? How did you cope with the disappointment of not getting what you wanted? Because that coping skill alone can also speak volumes about how a person is and how they will handle themselves as a student and future professional. We regard every articling student as a potential employee, and we treat them that way through the whole process, because we do have a history of hiring our articling students. I articled at my law firm, and now I'm the managing partner, and I can say that for about half the lawyers who work there. So that's sort of how we treat everybody. And so that I could just recommend just selling yourself to the best you can. Like, this is what I did instead. One of our summer students had to go home and take care of his family for a month because they actually got sick. So we don't regard that as a negative. That was what he needed to do to take care of his family. They live in Southern Ontario. So.
Yeah, and I think I just want to echo that as well. There's, try to find opportunities where you can, maybe if they're a project that you're passionate about, something that you can, a mentor you can find at a firm that can give you some type of project to work on. Try to build those connections with people, maybe do, virtual chats, coffee chats with people to get to know them. I have a really good friend who essentially created a position at a firm by just having a conversation, and that conversation turned into an interview. So I think when you're having these virtual conversations and trying to network, maybe always, maybe try to have that kind of sense of this could be a potential opportunity, right? So always just be on your toes. And also all the things that you do aside from, looking for work and, unfortunately, having offers rescinded, you can kind of use those things to build character and also, perseverance, I think, is very key, specifically in this situation. And I think a lot of employers will give students grace, knowing that this is a very unique situation for so many. So don't be too hard on yourself. Try best as you can to keep pushing forward. There are jobs out there. You just kind of have to maybe create opportunities for yourself as well.
Yes, absolutely. And keeping in mind, right, that this is quite unprecedented. Nobody really expected this. So turning those negatives into positives and highlighting your ability to adapt. I mean, your ability to adapt to a new climate is, it's an advantage in no matter what area of law you're looking at. So, and again, if you offers rescinded, perseverance through that, right? There's always that silver lining whenever something happens. And you really just have to try to, displaying your facts and a factum, right? Just try to shine the facts in a positive light to you, and always remember that nobody really expected this. And so I don't think, try your best not to take it personal, because it's just really affecting everybody in that way.
It's very true. It was very unexpected and no one expected this. Thank you all for your tips and insight. We do have a viewer question, and just a reminder to our audience, if you do have questions that you'd like to pose during this panel, just type it in the chat and I will ask it to our panelists. So the question is, how varied should one's passions and interests be? Must it be primarily focused on community, or is there other interests or passions that they should speak to?
I think varied is always a good thing. Diversity is the spice of life. But as for whether it has to be community focused, that might depend more on what you're interested in terms of area of law. I should emphasize that I was at the time applying pretty much exclusively to Crown Attorney's offices. So for me, community was a big part, because that's one of the things Crowns in particular look for, and I assume most firms, is that you care about the community, because people have to work with you, and whether or not you're a fantastic lawyer, it's more than just your brain. People care about your heart.
Yeah, I agree. And I think also, it doesn't really matter what outside activities you do, obviously within a specific scope. But I think being able to build transferable skills, whether it's leadership, interpersonal skills, you know, organizational skills, multitasking, like if you're doing a whole bunch of different things at once, I think that's very key in the legal profession, to be able to balance and juggle all of those things. So I think whatever you're passionate about, you can pursue if you can balance that with, you know, your studies, and or balance that with articling. And I don't think that it should be fixed to community, but I do agree with Logan that in particular, because I was solely focused on employment law, I kind of just threw my hat in there and said, this is what I want to do. It all worked out, but, and they're particularly focused on community service, legal clinics, and things of that nature as well. So on the onset of law school, I kind of said, you know what, these are the things I'm going to at least apply to try to build those kind of skills that could be transferred to this type of area of law. So, yeah.
We also look for things that are outside. If you have some of that and then you balance it with, for example, we have a young associate in my firm who's really, really athletic and joins like every sports team in town. But we literally get clients because he knows everyone. He's also equally also super interested in, because of up here, fishing and whatnot. And so he's involved with the local, and I'm like, well, you know, it's still the community, but it's his own passion. And he's involved in other things as well. So, your passion doesn't necessarily have to be super formal. It can be something that's a little bit slightly outside the beaten path, but you can sell that. Like he's like, yeah, I'm super involved. These are the things I love to do, and I love it up here. And we're like, you're fabulous. Okay. And he fits in beautifully because that's kind of a lot of people up this way. So you can sell it for where you are as well, what kind of community you're looking at, as to your other external passions aside from just your more active community joining. I'm explaining this poorly, but you know what I mean? Like it's just sell it all of it is part of you, and make yourself sound like a person who's well-rounded and interested in things, makes you interesting. So we will be more likely to remember you and therefore more likely to hire you.
Thank you for those tips. I know Ms. Pottinger said that your workplace still went into the office, but I guess I'll pose this question to Logan and Danielle. I know due to the pandemic, at least in Toronto, it was a working from home experience, and some may have viewed that as not, I guess, receiving the full experience of working in an office. So what would you say to that, and how could you encourage these students to still market these skills and portray this experience in their cover letter?
Well, I think for me, the tail end of my articling was work from home. And it was particularly devastating to me because I love my firm and I love the people there. They're so helpful. We're a very collaborative firm. We're very small as well. So it was kind of a shock to me, like, who do I turn to now to ask for help? But, you know, people were right there on the phone if I needed anything. Also, I think it gave me a sense of independence where I kind of took initiative to maybe draft something without asking for help, and kind of build certain confidences talking to clients or potential clients. And I think a lot of those things towards the tail end of my articling really highlighted why they should hire me. So it was really good to kind of be able to take initiative, and you can talk about the fact that you had to adapt to changing climates and the changing work environment, and kind of maybe take more initiative in, you know, putting in a strategy on a file, or, you know, if there's something that you're drafting, kind of you know, you put something to a lawyer, as opposed to when you're in person. I feel like I was more like, what should I do next? Because they're right there. I could just run over to their office. But, you know, calling them when they're busy or not available because you're all at home, it was more like I just had to take that initiative. And I think that highlighted confidence, which is key.
Would agree with that, certainly. For me personally, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. One of my favorite parts of my articling was being able to just pop into a nearby courtroom and just watch a trial. It was a very nice experience, and I do feel for all of you who won't be able to really have that same opportunity. But that being said, I mean, once this lockdowns, when we get to the end, if it ever comes, you know, courts are open. You're always able to pop in and just observe on your own time. You don't have to be employed to go in and observe a court case. And then if you ask around, most lawyers, I find, if you approach them nicely, will answer your questions, give you a little insight into there, because law school does a great job of teaching us how to think like lawyers, but it's not always the best in terms of how to act like a lawyer and the actual process of arguing on your feet. So again, taking your own initiative to go in and explore and observe where you can. But that being said, while that was certainly one of my personal favorite aspects of the job, it was a small percentage of the actual job. The paperwork, working from home, that was very much the same. I agree with Danielle, not being able to just pop over to the next office and talk to people. The office I worked in particular was an open door policy, so there was just constantly people walking around discussing items. But having to do that from home just means now you're emailing one another. And I mean, networking like that is another important skill. So again, try to focus on the positive. It really is unfortunate, but you got to play the hand that you're dealt, to use that old expression. And in terms of missing out being able to observe, I do highly recommend anybody get into the courtrooms and see what actually goes on. It will just help a lot, I think, in the long run.
I will just say in a small part, our articling student, because it looked uncertain for a little bit, handled herself beautifully, and she chose not to stay in the area for her own personal reasons. But I actually told her if she ever needed a reference, I would highlight to her how calm, cool, collected she was, how adaptable she was, how willing she was to be like, okay, if I got to work at home, I'll work at home. If I don't got to work at home, I don't got to work at home. You know what I mean? Like, she was very, very wonderful about handling the situation. So emphasizing the fact that you still got your tasks done, you still got your deliverables to your lawyers on time, that you still connected with people, will definitely make you shine to future employers, because it definitely impressed me.
Yes, I certainly agree. I think being adaptable is very important. So we're going to transition from the application stage to the interview stage. So once a student successfully passes the application stage, many individuals run into the challenge or issue of being unsuccessful during the interview stage. So how can a student translate who they are and what they represent on paper into the interview stage, particularly since the articling recruitment cycle this term will be virtual interviews? How can a student ensure that they best present themselves during this time? And anyone can answer this.
I'll just start only because my articling interview was virtual because I was in Ottawa for law school, and the firm is obviously in Toronto. So my initial interview was actually virtual. So I kind of went through the experience without it being during a pandemic. And I think I just, made sure that I was engaging with both parties on the other end, smiling, keeping up the energy, which is hard to do virtually. But I know that my now colleagues said when they spoke to me that it was weird how my energy was still up and like the conversation was good and I wasn't like weird pauses and I just tried to keep it as though we were still in front of each other and having a conversation. And I think that's important. You're in the comfort of your own space, but don't get too comfortable. Just know that you're still in an interview and just be on, right? Like, have the energy. It's all about energy and passion and also being genuine. I think when you really want a particular position, it does show and it highlights in the way that you speak about certain things that you've done, and your passion of the area of law per se. So I think it's important to just have that energy, be genuine, know the firm, just have all of those things together. And that's for any interview, but virtually I think you really have to engage and smile and if you talk with your hands, maybe talk with your hands. But I just think I think you have to keep your energy up for sure when it's like a virtual interview.
Definitely. I mean, at the end of the day, these are people that are interviewing you not just to see how good you might be as a lawyer in that firm, but these people need to work with you, right? They're going to ideally want somebody who can make eye contact, who has that energy, as Danielle pointed out. My particular experience, my advice might not apply as well to everybody because the Crown attorneys interviews, it's a very different sort of beast in terms of all the questions are graded and whatnot. So I'll try to generalize the advice the best I can, but essentially you don't want to ramble, but at the same time, I believe a longer answer is better than a short answer, right? In the Crown context, obviously a longer answer, there's more points that you can earn, but in just the general discussion, rather than say something such as, I find disclosure is important, try to name drop a few cases in there. Try to, oh, well, the Queen and Stinchcomb tells us disclosure is important because X, or the Crown's prosecution manual suggests we do Y. It's just a way of showing them, again, highlighting that passion, because it shows that you've done the research, you've looked into the firm, and it's something that you care about, and that's what they wanted. There's plenty of students they can choose from with pretty decent grades, right? But what makes you stand out is that you want to be there, and you need to show them that you want to be there.
For me, I would say one of the big ones that we often notice is make an effort to know the firm you're interviewing at. And I know that sounds really basic, but you'd be shocked how many people don't do that. We had an entire interview where they went on and on about how they want to do criminal law, and it's the only area of law my firm does not do. So we're sitting there staring at them the whole interview like, oh, this is interesting. Well, we can't hire you, but good luck. Anyway, so it was almost astonishing. And we've had a few like that where they came in and talked about areas of law or seeking, certain information or mentorship. And we're like, what are you doing? We're primarily a corporate firm with labor and employment law. What are you talking about? So, so know the firm you're interviewing at, be interested, and then try to share who you are. Because that's the big thing. When you're in a slightly more unusual, less big center, we really want to know who you are and whether you think you will fit both at the firm and in the community, in terms of your interests and passions and things like that. So we want to see some of you. So if everything seems really robotic or really cut and paste of an answer, sounds really great, but we're like, we don't know who this person is. And so then how can we possibly say that they'll be content or happy or enjoy living and working here? So show us who you are as well, and know where you're going.
And just to add to that quickly, I think it's kind of a two-way conversation as well in interviews, and not every firm is going to want to be interested in you or know about you. I've had a few articling interviews where they didn't really ask me much about myself. It was more so talking about themselves or other lawyers of color that they may have had. So just know that not every interview is going to be the interview that's the great interview. But I know for me, intuition told me when I had a particular interview for the firm that I'm at now, that they wanted to know literally everything on my resume, down to my interests of going to boot camp. So it's like you can sense that back and forth, and you can sense that as much as they're interviewing you, you are also interviewing them, right? You're also saying, are you interested in me? Do you think that you can work with me? Can I work with you? And you can feel that and suss that out, I think, as intelligent people, and see where maybe an interview is kind of just like, maybe this is not the right fit. Not every firm is going to be the right fit for you, right? So.
Yep, that's true. So we do have a viewer question from Alicia Ray. What's the best way to make it known that you're willing and ready to relocate for a job?
Just say it.
Yeah, arguably. Throw that on the cover letter.
Yeah.
Put that in the cover letter for sure.
Put that in the cover letter. Say you're interested in the North, or particularly interested in some things that we have in the North. I'm not a particularly outdoorsy person myself, but that's a big selling feature up here. I'm like, oh, that's nice. People like to camp. I don't understand you people, but okay. But people who love that kind of stuff love it up here because it's 15 minutes away versus hours away. So what say you're willing to relocate, and perhaps even put a reason why. I have family. We have one young man who loves it up here. He's super far away from his family. He's like, I love that. Thank you. I want to be far away from my family. I'm like, okay. I relocated too. So yeah.
Thank you for that. So Danielle, I know you mentioned that it is like a two-way conversation. So in terms of etiquette, especially with technology, a lot of things can happen. Internet can go off. Right? Let's say that happens during the interview. So is there any tips that any of you can give on how to bounce back from any issues that happen? Like what to do next? How can a student sort of recuperate from any challenge that happens during the interview?
I think just keep going. I know in my interview that there was a bit of a lag with the internet. And at one point, the lawyer was frozen on the other end, but I was just still talking because I didn't know if maybe I was frozen or not. And then, when things reconnected, I just said, oh, I I was just explaining this, like, did you hear me? Just have a conversation, be mature. We're all grown people, I think, who are not socially inept. I think we all have social skills. And I think, you know, if something happens, it's not our fault, it's technology. We can't really do anything about that, but just continue on with the confidence. Don't let it kind of break up that streak that you're having in terms of confidence when you're having the conversation or answering a question. And yeah, just, you know, don't get awkward. I think that's most important. Just kind of let it roll off your back and keep going. If there's something that they didn't hear or miss, just ask if they would like you to repeat something. I think that's pretty much it.
Yeah, I echo the same sentiment. I mean, technical difficulties can happen in the middle of a trial, and being able to just roll with the punches and adapt to the unexpected is just another skill you want to try to foster and highlight to those people.
And have a laugh about it. So, you know, yeah, it's like, you know, it happens.
Anybody's human, right? It's not quite like TV. Mistakes happen in the courtroom, and it's trying not to be too hard on yourself, especially, I don't know, I think it's a law student thing that we expect so much of ourselves, and we put ourselves on a very high standards for ourselves, but you gotta laugh. Yeah, it's just life.
And also we see lawyers as like on a pedestal, like they are great people. We have, you know, a great job, and we do a lot for our community as a whole, but I think like they're human too. Like they might just chuckle at that as well. Like they might not take it so seriously. And I mean, you kind of want to work with people who are like that anyways, that might not be so serious. Like that might be the type of people you want to work with. For me, I just feel like, you know, it's not that serious as long as you just continue. So
yeah, don't let it throw you. That's probably the biggest thing. If it throws you, they're like, okay, well, if they get thrown by technology, they're not going to be able to handle when a file goes off the rails. So, you know what I mean? So if they can just sort of be like, okay, well, that happens, let's keep going. And then you're like, okay, they're cool. They can handle this.
Definitely, I agree. Thank you for that. I'm going to pass this question back to you, Ms. Pottinger. So often the recruitment director and the recruitment team are faced with the dilemma of picking between two ideal candidates. So what would you say is the main factor which contributes to that splitting decision?
Well, sometimes it has nothing to do with the student themselves. Sometimes it's just a certain area of law the student has expressed interest in that we would like that student to be in. So for example, we have a very senior partner who's planning to retire in a couple of years, and it's already planned out. He's heavy into corporate, commercial, and real estate. So we literally hired our last articling student because that was sort of where she said she was willing to do anything during her articling year, but her long-term goal was to work in that area of law. And sure enough, as she's worked there, she's shown some definite skill in that area, and we're very pleased. But that was filling our gap, our need, and it really doesn't have anything to do with the student themselves, and that was just pure coincidence. When there isn't a particular reason like that, often it's just who seem to be the most engaged and interested in the firm itself. You know, who seemed, you know, sometimes people look great on paper, they interview really well, but one's sort of like a generic, they do well anywhere, and we're pretty confident they'll go off and get a job and they'll be fine. This student seemed to be really great, and we think they'd match with us really well. So it really is sort of very subjective as to what the firm needs at that exact minute and who seemed the most interested and interesting in the firm itself. And that's who we hired as a result.
Great, thank you. And Logan and Danielle, I know you both went through the 2L summer recruit and the articling recruitment. Would you say there was any significant changes in how you approach these two recruitments? Was there something important that you had to change, or do you think you had the same sort of mindset going through both of them?
I think for me, the 2L recruit, first of all, I only had 1L under my belt, so I was lost. And I was also nervous, and I didn't know what I wanted to do. Like, I knew the area of law, but I think I was just kind of a bit of a lemming in terms of like, okay, everyone's doing it, let's just do OCI. So like, I did it because I didn't want to miss out on something. And I think looking back, maybe I wouldn't have done that. I would have just, you know, focused on specific firms that I really wanted to work at. And I think by the time I got to the articling recruit process, I was just more confident in myself. I had built a lot more practical skills. My resume was more diverse and had more, I think, transferable types of skills based off of all the different things that I had done. So I felt a little bit more confident. And I was also very particular in terms of what firms I was applying to, as opposed to 50 firms. I applied to maybe 20 firms that I really did my research on. So I think that was, you know, key for me. And I ended up getting a handful more of interviews for articling as opposed to the 2L recruit. But I just think that, you know, just it will happen like naturally. Like you think that, oh, it might be the same outcome because it's, you know, they're looking for the same types of people and they're looking at my grades and different things of that nature. But I think the skills that you build that you don't even know that you're building, from 2L to, you know, going into your 3L year, I think that those are skills that highlight who you are and the growth that you've had, and firms really look at that. So, yeah.
My experiences might be a bit too unique to benefit others, but similar to Danielle, I hadn't really planned originally to even apply for the summer position, but then I had heard through the grapevine that there was a possibility that the likelihood of being hired for the articling position might be improved if I had tried to apply for the 2L to basically show that, you know, something that I had wanted to do for a long time. So I think it was a few days before the deadline. I had to quickly email and harass some professors for letters of reference. And oddly enough, because I wasn't expecting much from it, I felt I was just more relaxed than I would normally have been. I was comfortable because it was just, you know, throwing caution to the wind. And but definitely in the summer position, for the summer interview, I focused more on highlighting myself on a more personal level as to my interests, my passions, and what I wanted to do. Whereas for the articling position, I tried to focus more on my knowledge and my skills and experience by that time. And again, because I had summered and articled at the same firm, at the same Crown Attorney's office rather, knowing the people helped me a lot for the second one. So that made me comfortable the second time around, but I was sweating bullets right up until that interview. So however you find your comfort, it might be different based on who you are. For me, it's over preparation, trying to know everything I possibly can, which also leads to a fair amount of stress because you think you're going to be asked everything and then you're not. I mean, for the articling position in particular at the Crown, I must have spent 5+ hours just studying evidentiary issues and KGB statements and whatnot. And then I wasn't asked a single question that had anything to do with evidence at the interview. But knowing that I had that in, you know, my back pocket just helped make me relax, help keep me comfortable, because again, they want to see who you are, and it's hard to show who you are when you're stressed.
That's true. Thank you for that. I know, Ms. Pottinger, you said your employment focuses primarily on corporate and labor and employment, and I know, Danielle, you did employment as well. So my next question would be, for the interview, if you can just speak to how the actual interview was, if tailoring towards labor employment. I know Logan just spoke about the Crown, but Ms. Pottinger, how does your firm sort of, like, what type of questions do they ask? And Danielle, like, how do you remember your interview process?
Well, when we interview for a very generic articling position, because we don't specify our articling will work with everybody in the firm. So everything from litigation to labor and employment to real estate, wills, the whole kit and caboodle, an articling student will actually get a taste of everything we do at the firm. And if you have a specific interest, you can kind of, so for example, the current articling student we have does a lot of other stuff, but has really made efforts to talk to our corporate commercial people, and is getting therefore more work from them. But it really kind of is how we sell. So when we interview, we ask for your interest. Why does that interest you? What do you like about it? How do you see that working? How would you get and go out in the community and get that kind of work? What would you, what kind of things would you do to participate in sort of getting that in the door? And then how would you do that kind of work? So that's kind of how we frame it. But we kind of let the articling student discover themselves, because some people come in and say, I really want to do corporate commercial, and they end up loving litigation. And we're like, okay, that's okay. You can do that. Like, we don't pigeonhole people from the get-go. And that's one of the nice things about working at a smaller center, is that you get to kind of taste everything and then chase what you actually find interesting. Actually, when I interviewed, I said I was not remotely interested in corporate commercial. Now it's like 50% of my practice. I was like, this is horrible. I don't want to do this area. Well, now I love it. It's seriously my favorite. So you actually just end up getting to try a little bit of everything. But yeah, we specifically asked for our the articling student to share what they find interesting. Why was that interesting to you? What draws you to it? What do you think that would be like in practice? Because sometimes some students don't have a very good idea of how it actually, they love the idea of it and they love learning about it, but actually practicing that area of law is super unfun. We had one articling student who actually at the end said, I really hate telling employers they can't do things all the time, because employers are stupid. And now we just all burst into laughter because we're like, and they're like, I hate this. These people are stupid. No, you can't say that to an employee. Like, what are you thinking? Anyway, and they were like, can I do some other area of law? And we're like, yes, you can. So, you know, sometimes what they think it'll be is not what it is. So, yeah.
I think for me, I forgot who said this prior, but once you get out of law school, it's kind of like, okay, you have an interest in this area, you're passionate about this area. At the end of the day, they're going to teach you the way their firm does things, the processes that they use, you'll do the practical work. So you'll actually build the skills of being a lawyer practically once you start articling. So I think in particular in my firm, the most important thing was, can we get along with her? Like, it's a small firm. I think I'm the 10th or 11th lawyer at the firm. And I think it's just it's like the whole fit thing that we talk about in regards to big corporate firms and us fitting in because maybe we golf or we go to the cottage or something of that nature. But I do think fit works the other way. And I feel like my firm is very young. Everyone's around the same age. I think we all have similar perspectives. We're all we're very focused on our work and very good at our work, but we're also like to have some laid back time, you know, go into someone's office and have a conversation here or there. So they want to know, can I talk to Danielle about things outside of work? Do we get along? And I think a lot of the questions were focused on, you know, me as a person and just how I react to things and my temperament and just seeing what type of person I am. I did over prepare, obviously, and like researched all the cases that the firm did that were reported that I could find and brought them up towards the end of like my interview, which I hope, you know, highlighted the fact that I did research on the firm. But I think it's all about connection and it's all about fit for yourself and for the other and for the employer, right? So in terms of employment law, I think I made it clear in my CV that that's what I was focused about. I highlighted in my CV a personal experience about a family member being terminated and the fact that, you know, employment lawyers were there for them in a time when, you know, they were at their lowest in terms of their life because, you know, employment is the crux of a lot of people's livelihoods. So I think highlighting that they already knew that I was already passionate about the area of law. So now it was just about, can we work with her? So, you know, my initial interview was with two people online, virtually. And then I had an in-person interview where I spoke to two more lawyers and then I went and met the partners. So I think at that point in time, they were like, okay, does she get along with everyone? That's the main thing. So yeah, I just think, you know, it's about connection and fit in that way as much as possible as you can do in an interview, right?
Yes, thank you for that. Oh, Logan, did you?
Sorry.
No, go ahead.
But when we talk about passion, I mean, I should also point out that most people start somewhere and end somewhere else. I mean, I was one of the fortunate ones that I put my blinders on pretty early in 1L and said, criminal law, yes, that's what I want. And the more and more I got into it, I'm just happy I never got sick of it and only started to like it more. But I think I'm in the minority in that one. Most of the people at the Crown's office I worked in would have 5 years in civil law or 10 years in employment before they eventually found their way to the Crown Attorney's office. So, I mean, at the end of the day, you have to kind of really put yourself into these experiences to see what you like, which again, I want to reemphasize, going to court, watching what you can, and, you know, whatever you think you're passionate about, great, run with that. But don't be afraid if it doesn't turn out to be quite what you hope it is, because one of the best things about having a law degree is it is extremely flexible. There's a lot of things you can do with a JD, so don't ever feel pigeonholed or that you're trapped into whatever you initially decided. You have a lot of options and don't be afraid to explore them.
Thank you for that. We're going to shift a little bit to the actual articling period. So I'm going to ask our panelists, I don't know if there's such thing as a typical day, but what would a typical day in your articling employment position look like? What did you do during your articling period?
In the early days, my typical day was just sitting by my desk with imposter syndrome, wondering what I was supposed to do. But as I got a little more comfortable with it, again, at the Crown Attorney's office, it's a bit of a unique situation because we're right attached to the courtroom. So I'm not personally a big morning person. I like to give the brain a couple hours to warm up. So I got to just wander around the courtrooms and pop in and out to see what would go on, and usually not get back to the computer till after lunch. But what I would then do is just second half of the day was all work, no play. And I would typically, whatever I didn't do during that early initial period, I would then stay late. Staying late, it's not a bad thing. It looks good when you do it. So I always recommend staying late. Obviously don't stay late if you don't have work to do, but if you are, I guess, showing the initiative to find things to do and to look for where you can assist people, there's always work there as long as you're willing to go look for it.
Yeah, I agree.
So a typical day for me would be, half of it spent observing, half of it spent researching, and then 2 to 3 hours afterwards every day continuing to work. But when you get a reputation for being the person who leaves late, it's a good reputation to have.
I agree. I was always the first one in and last one out. And I didn't really mind. I think throughout my previous careers and previous jobs, like I don't mind staying late. But for me, a typical day was just, being able to sit in on consults, go to mediations and discoveries with the lawyers. Like there was a lot of practical work that I was able to do. I drafted pretty much every document that I would need to draft as a lawyer. So I think that really prepared me now, because I too still feel the imposter syndrome 3 months in to being a lawyer. But I mean, I'm pushing through with confidence, but being able to draft all of those things and, go to these different mediations and see how, the communication back and forth with lawyers is, and being able to do motions by myself, the ones that I could go do from beginning to end, kind of preparing me to have that confidence and to do the practical work. I think I had a great experience in that vein. I'm not sure what the experience are for other students. I did do some legal research, but I think a lot of my day focused on drafting things, factums and statements of claims and different things of that nature. So I think it prepared me to kind of, continue on as a lawyer in that role without being super lost and kind of doing it on my own with obviously help from, the other lawyers, but kind of just threw me in there. So I'm just going with it.
Thank you for that. So we're going to be wrapping up soon. I guess my last-ish question, and if there's any burning questions from the audience they'd like to ask now or wait to the breakout session, just chime in. But so what is one advice or tip that you received during your recruitment cycle, or just in general, that you would give to our viewers here as they are preparing to venture off into this articling recruitment period?
I think the weirdest one I ever got was, don't make yourself small to make yourself fit into what you think they want. Because I had sort of an interesting, different background. I'd gone and worked in Europe for a couple of years and stuff like that before I articled. And so somebody said to me, well, when you're looking for a job, don't make yourself small to fit into what you think they want. And I think that paid off. And I think that applies to everyone. Don't undersell yourself. Everybody is interesting and everybody has things that they care about. And so show us that, and you will find the firm that's the right fit for you, or at least a good place to get some experience before you move on to the place that's right for you.
I think one of the best tips that I was given, and I forget who gave it to me, but I give it to every student now, is make yourself known to the firm, because there's so many people that are applying. Honestly, you are a number, but if you set yourself apart, that is great. And by setting yourself apart, I mean, before you apply, reach out to somebody at the firm. In fact, reach out to more than somebody, reach out to a couple of people, have some informal, you know, informational interviews, find out a little bit more about the firm, let them know a little bit about you and your passion to work at that firm, you know, and throw that conversation in your CV saying you spoke with this lawyer, obviously asking for their permission, but saying that you spoke to this particular lawyer about the firm, and, you know, maybe in the first paragraph highlight that, you know, this is kind of what they explained about the firm. I think just kind of setting yourself apart, because I didn't realize until at my firm, which is a smaller firm, kind of, you know, let me know that this is true, that people do talk and they like ask about particular people. And if they call the articling student, for example, and chat with them, they'll ask me like, what do you think about this person, and different things of that nature. So just kind of make yourself be known prior to the application process. So when your application comes across the desk, they're like, oh, I remember speaking to so-and-so and they were great. And, you know, I think we should give them an opportunity. And that could be despite your grades and despite what's on your CV, right? So.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, I recommend going to court is a great way to actually meet people and start getting that face-to-face or name reference. Obviously, we got to wait till the courts reopen fully, but you know, one of these days. One of the best pieces of advice I had received was that an articling student is still a student, and there's really two aspects of that. One being that you don't know everything, so don't beat yourself up over it. You're expected to still learn. And one of the issues I personally had to deal with early on was if I had a question, I would ask myself 1,000 times, is this a stupid question? Is this something I should already know? And half the time I could just save myself a lot of effort if I just went and asked somebody this simple question, but instead I'm trying to teach myself and spending hours of my own time because I don't want to look like I don't know something yet, when at the same time they come to you to ask you to do research questions. They bring you questions that you knew in 1L. So it's not uncommon for people to have questions, and don't be afraid to ask them. The second aspect of that, you know, remember you're a student, is to try not to come off as arrogant or cocky in any way. I think during my interview, there were a few hypothetical style questions, you know, how would you handle this situation? And at least once or twice, I would tack on to the end of my answer, you know, after everything what I would have done, I would end it with a little, and then I would ask another crown to benefit from their experience, because I don't want to assume that I know everything about a given subject. And, you know, if you're going to be part of a firm, that means you're part of a team. You need to be a team player.
Great, thank you for these tips. Okay, so I'm going to wrap up. I want to say, firstly, thank you to our three panelists, Ms. Pottinger, Logan, Danielle. Thank you for your advice, your wonderful insight. We really appreciate your time here with us. I want to thank all our viewers for tuning in today. I hope you gained a lot and learned a lot, and good luck in your experience. We're going to be shifting over into our breakout sessions now. So I believe our president, Tiana, has put you all in your breakout rooms, and we will be moving on to that. So thank you again, everyone.
Thank you, Steph, and thank you to the panelists. Thank you, Ms. Pottinger. Thank you, Logan. Thank you, Danielle. That was a great panel, so insightful. And so like Steph said, we're going to be transitioning into our breakout sessions. And, you know, I think this is a really great opportunity for students to get some one-on-one you know, time to talk to a few lawyers. So the breakout session will be quite prompt, only a half an hour. And I do just want to introduce some of the great lawyers that we have, who we haven't already met, who will be a part of the breakout session. So I'd like to start off with the Ministry of Attorney General lawyers. So the session leaders for the government breakout session include Tracy Kozlowski, Holly Luber, Justin Reed, and Nadia Thomas. And they are from the Crown Law Office Criminal, which plays a critical role in Ontario's Criminal Law Division, the largest prosecution service in Canada. Comprised of over 90 lawyers, the Crown Office Criminal is engaged in all aspects of criminal practice, arguing appeals in the Court of Appeal for Ontario and the Supreme Court of Canada, conducting jury trials for offences committed by people involved in the administration of justice, including police officers, lawyers and judges, as well as particularly complex prosecutions such as hate crime, serious fraud, financial crimes, and organized crime, and providing advice to the police and other prosecutors. Counsel at the Crown Law Office, Criminal, are responsible for developing criminal law policy for the province. This includes providing legal policy and strategic advice to the Attorney General in relation to criminal code reforms and giving practical legal advice to prosecutors across the province about criminal law reform. There's also the Inclusion Tank, which is a group of Crown Counsel and professional staff at Crown Law Office Criminal, whose mission is to implement the principles of diversity and inclusion, including anti-racism, into their organizational policies, practices, and daily actions. The Inclusion Tank offers support to the Student Committee with respect to recruitment and retention practices, provides education and training to the office, including for the student program around inclusion and diversity issues such as anti-racism, and offers support to students interested in pursuing a career in criminal law or working for the Crown. So I'd like to welcome the MAG lawyers and thank them for participating in today's breakout session. And also we have a few lawyers from Denton's here with us today. We have Kimberly Grange, Javid Pendrani, and Corey Williams. Javid is a partner in Denton's Ottawa office and has a corporate and regulatory practice. He's the chair of the Ottawa Student Committee. Corey is a partner in the Toronto Banking and Finance Group at Denton's and chair of the Toronto Student Committee. And Kimberly Grange oversees Denton's Toronto Student Program and recruitment process. So I'd like to thank them all for coming in to participate in today's session. So the way that the breakout session will take place is we'll do about 10 to 15 minute sessions each. So students will have the opportunity to speak with government lawyers in one session. And then after that session, they'll be able to speak to lawyers in private practice. So there's an opportunity to speak with both. So we're looking forward to a great session. And also we have Amitha Carnadin on the line as well, who's an associate at BLG. So I'm just gonna start putting everybody in breakout rooms. So bear with me as I do that.